Some weapons are only found in the hands of the gifted, divine weapons. Such weapons are the materialization of the human soul, a weapon with unique abilities. One noble family once defeated an evil god. People from this family are born special. They have a strong and powerful body. These people have incredible talent, and with all this, they are divinely armed. The boy was born into this ducal family. Of course, he had to become a hero who would proudly wield his sacred or divine weapon. Or rather, it should have been so because at the oracle ceremony, at which the divine armament of a person is usually determined when he is still a child, the boy received nothing at that ceremony. So he became the only loser in the entire history of his ducal family, the catastrophe. The other children pushed him to the ground and called him a disgrace to the family. The offender was a red-eyed and white-haired boy. His name was Zane, and he was the second son of the catastrophe family. And he was older than Belle, whom he was currently offending, mocking in every possible way. Zane grabbed the blue-haired boy by a strand of hair roughly and harshly, lifting his head off the ground and saying that there was no place for worthless people like him who couldn't summon a divine weapon. The blue-haired child groaned, not giving a clear answer but looking miserable and already beaten up enough. Two girls were watching what was happening. The fair-haired and tall girl in a blue dress was the eldest daughter. Her name was Jessica, and she was smiling, watching the cruel thing that was happening. And the younger daughter, named Saraphima, dressed in pink clothes, clearly did not like this sight and found it terrible, even frightening. "Belle!" Saraphima cried sadly, walking forward towards her blue-haired brother in the hopes of somehow helping him. Jessica tripped her up, not wanting to let her go ahead. The youngest daughter fell face down on the ground. Jessica placed her heel on the girl's head, wondering what she was up to since she had been ordered to just watch. The eldest daughter ordered to watch what was happening to such worthless people as Saraphima and Belle without letting the girl go. The blue-haired boy called out to his younger sister in fear. Zane slammed his fist into Belle's stomach, still holding him by the hair, not giving him a chance to escape. The white-haired boy dropped his brother to the ground and pounced on him with his fists from above, asking if he was sure he could handle this. The fists delivered powerful blows to Belle's face. Saraphima was also not left without her share of insults, as Jessica did not forget to come up with a couple of rude and disgusting nicknames for the girl. Belle and Saraphima were the children of concubines, which is why they were called mongrel, and were also bullied at every opportunity, beaten, mocked, and insulted in a variety of ways. The boy sat on his knees in front of his sister, apologizing and claiming that it was his fault that she suffered because of him. Saraphima asked him not to worry about it and said that she would always be with him. Belle promised his sister that he would become stronger even without the divine weapon. He promised to protect Saraphima at the cost of his life. The sister thanked Belle, throwing herself into his arms. Alas, the boy could not keep his promise because a few days later he was kicked out of the Duke's estate. Belle lifted his head up, exposing his face to the raindrops, cursing in his mind as he ran away from his home, where he was mostly haunted by troubles and suffering. Without him, Saraphima would be left all alone with them. He needed strength. He had to get his sister out of that house. Possession of ordinary weapons will do nothing against the one who has divine weapons in his hands, because they are more powerful, stronger, and give the owner various abilities. So the boy had to do everything to become stronger. He simply had no choice if he wanted to protect his beloved sister, whom he valued more than anything in the world. The heavy bag hit the wooden surface of the merchant's counter. Belle was going to take one of every kind of weapon in this store. His fingers fingered the gold coins that fell out of the bag with a ringing sound. The old man asked in a bewildered tone if the boy was planning to start a war since he was taking so many different weapons. After 2 years, the horse was galloping forward quickly. Belle rode forward on his brown horse. His face was stern. Before him stood a crowd of monstrous goblins, intent on attacking him. The guy, who had already grown up over the past 2 years, laid out in front of him all of his weapons which he had bought a long time ago and mastered. He decided to start this battle. Belle deftly wielded both the sword and the mace at the same time. The man quickly changed weapons one after another, cutting the goblins to pieces. The guy quickly created a pile of green corpses in front of him. Someone's foot stepped forward on the rock. A figure in a white cloak stood on the edge of this high cliff. This figure was watching what was happening below, the guy's battle with a crowd of green monsters. The man wondered if Belle always carried so many weapons. It was an unusual feature. Did the guy have to do this because he didn't have a divine weapon, or was there another reason? The man in the cloak had already forgotten why he had set out on this journey. His task was to find a person who could be trusted with this matter. He needed a person with great heroic potential, and he searched for such a person for quite a long time. Belle put his hands on his hips, looking forward with an exhausted look. A blue magic ball appeared in the hand of the mysterious person, releasing sparks. The man shot lightning in the direction of Bell, who was standing below the cliff. A sparkling white patterned scabbard appeared in front of the guy, driven into the hard stone ground, piercing through it. The boy was caught off guard and stared wide-eyed at the object in front of him. The man in the cloak said that he was giving this definitely valuable thing to the guy. The scabbard continued to sparkle, remaining in the same place. Bell extended his hand forward, suggesting that he had been gifted with a sword, which could prove to be a useful item. His hand grabbed the object, squeezing it tightly as he looked at it. The boy realized with indignation and bewilderment that it was just an empty scabbard when he took it into his hands. This was the divine scabbard of Avalon, a one-of-a-kind weapon that could store divine weapons and pass them on to others, which was quite an unusual feature of this scabbard. It is passed down from generation to generation, each time increasing its power and passing it on to the next owners. Now it contains the weapons of 5 great heroes, remembered by humanity for their strength. If one can master each of them, then the most powerful divine armament in the entire world will be in one's hands. And that person had to be Bell, which was an important and significant fact. 3 whole years passed, the red dragon flew with a terrible roar towards the stone tower. He saw his target, 2 people, one of them was Bell, and the other person was his mysterious companion in a white long cloak with a hood, located on the top of the tower. The monster opened its mouth, inside which a bright scorching flame was already visible, beginning to blaze. In fact, Bell said, holding out his hand, palm forward, he didn't care about the attacks of this giant creature, albeit strong. Avalon, the boy shouted, drawing out his divine scabbard, calling it with his shout. The man took a fighting stance. Bell commanded something to appear, summoning his weapon. The scabbard in his hands shone with a bright, blinding light. The guy held out his palm, waiting for his next weapon to appear. The windshield of Achilles appeared in his hands. This shield covered Bell when the dragon spat fire in his direction, thus protecting him. The boy produced another weapon, a large hammer, and shouted, "Perfect storm." Bell swung his giant and bulky weapon. He flew high into the air, swinging his hammer at the gaping dragon. The boy hit the monster in the giant face with his thunder hammer Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. The dragon was defeated, and the figure in the white cloak said that Bell had finally taken control of Avalon after a long time. The man told the boy to go to his sister because now even an S-rank paladin would not be a hindrance to him, which is what the boy wanted to achieve. Bell looked at his interlocutor in surprise, as he was surprised by such words. But he agreed with the man in the white cloak because he wanted to see his beloved younger sister, for whose protection he had trained for so long, striving to become stronger. It had been 5 years since the boy's exile, but now he had the strength to protect his dear little sister, which definitely made him happy. Bell hoped that Saraphim would wait for him at their family ducal estate, from where he had once been expelled. He rode his horse at full speed, eager to return to his beloved younger sister. The guy noticed smoke and burning houses. Everything was painted in bright red and orange colors. He panicked and wondered what had happened here. Above the smoke, ash, and sparks, flags with a large image of the familiar coat of arms fluttered. This was the coat of arms of the Duchy of Rothwindsor. People were fighting each other, which made Bell think that a civil war had started. The battle did not look like a joke. It was a serious fight. The guy immediately rushed into the building in a panic, looking for his sister Saraphima and hoping that she was okay and healthy. A half-open door appeared in front of him, and he ran towards it, conducting his active search. In the room behind them, the guy discovered the body of a girl lying in a pool of blood. Bell's face showed horror at the realization of this fact. He immediately ran to the bloody body in the pink dress that belonged to Saraphima. The guy shook her, trying to get at least some reaction from his dead sister. But the girl did not answer him. She only remained silent with her eyes closed. Bell's eyes widened, horrified to realize that this wasn't some bad dream or anything and his sister really was dead. He remembered the girl's promise when she claimed that she would always be there for him, although Bell himself was not always there for her. The guy screamed, feeling intense mental pain. He had promised before that he would come back and protect his sister, and for that he was going to gain his current strength. Bell didn't understand why everything was happening like this, and what he should do now that his purpose in life had become so useless. A swift red beam appeared. It was sudden. This beam pierced the body of the guy sitting with a corpse on his knees, not ready to dodge. Bell threw his head back, groaning from the sharp pain that appeared in his chest, pierced by the beam. Someone's footsteps were heard approaching, which meant that their owner was already here. Bell felt the mana of the person who approached. It seemed to him that it was a divine weapon master of the S rank. This master recognized the guy in front of him, which surprised him. and said that he had heard about the exiled Belle. However, it didn't matter to this man, because he was going to reunite the boy with his sister by sending him to the world of the dead. Belle realized that it was this person who was guilty of the girl's death, killing her and leaving the body here. The man told the boy to be a good brother and keep Saraphima company forever, intending to kill him. Belle indignantly shouted at his interlocutor, asking how he dared to behave like that. At the moment of his death, he realized that he was dying without taking revenge, and the guy was not ready to accept it. Little Belle stood before the oracle in the temple, the multicolored light falling on the two of them from the stained glass windows, which was a familiar sight to him. The boy stared at his hands in surprise, not immediately realizing where he was, but recognizing everything around him. It was the Cathedral of the Holocaust, which made Belle think he had just died, kneeling next to his already dead little sister. The man said that he was beginning the oracle ceremony, which was an important moment in the child's life, because in his past life, it literally predetermined his entire life. The boy wondered if this meant he had been transported back in time to his childhood, and if this meant that everything could be changed. The oracle told Belle to stretch his hands forward to visualize his divine weapon in his mind. The boy thought about his weapon and what it could be. At that point, he had not yet found Avalon, which meant that he could not be here and now. Belle would have to start over again before he was sent away again. So he focused on the feeling in his outstretched arms, hoping that this time it would be different. When a blue light appeared in his palms, the boy could not believe his eyes, as he did not expect such a thing. There was no doubt that in his hands was the very Avalon that had faithfully accompanied him in his past life. He could now start all over again, with this thing in his hands, for this scabbard was strong and powerful. The boy was ready to change his destiny thanks to his strength, which was not there in his past life at this age. And so his real life begins, a life for which he was now ready. In Belle's hands was the divine scabbard, Avalon. The oracle said that the divine scabbard was a rare thing. This scabbard was special, and not everyone was given such a thing. Belle asked the man if he was sure he couldn't fight with the scabbard, as that was exactly the kind of conversation the boy expected from this grown man. The oracle answered negatively because he wanted to say something else, not this. The boy didn't need to worry, because in his hands was the best divine armament in the entire world. If he had gone back in time, then Saraphima should still be alive, so the boy ran as fast as he could towards her room, hoping he was right. Belle couldn't help but think about his sister. He prayed in his mind that she was alive. His hand grabbed the golden handle of the wooden door that served as the entrance to Sarah's bedroom. The girl sat on a red chair in front of a large window, looking out of it. Her hands folded on the hem of her pink dress, which she often wore. She turned her head, greeting her brother, who entered with a joyful smile. Belle thought that he had not seen his dear sister for a long time, because at first he spent 5 years trying to become stronger and reach a new rank. And when he returned, he found his beloved sister already in the form of a dead bloody corpse. Saraphima was the same as the boy remembered her, kind and smiling. The girl ran to her brother, ready to greet him. She asked Belle with anticipation how his ceremony went, and what divine weapon he received. The boy hugged Saraphima tightly instead of answering, as he was very glad that she was alive and well, although it was difficult for him to believe his eyes. The girl asked if Belle was okay. He was acting unusually for this part of his life. The boy begged her in his thoughts for forgiveness for the fact that he could not protect her in his past life. He was sorry, although he could not tell Saraphima about it. Belle remembered hugging his sister's dead body and screaming in despair over her body. It was a difficult, albeit recent memory for him. But this time he would not allow a tragedy to happen. The boy promised that this time, Saraphima would not experience any pain or sadness, because he would not let anyone hurt her. That now everything would be different. The girl muttered that it hurt, and Belle immediately released her, apologizing, stunned by the realization that his embrace had been so tight because he had become emotional. Saraphima said that there was nothing wrong with that, because her brother's hugs made her happier because of her not-so-happy life. "Brother," the girl said in surprise, paying attention to something. She was surprised to see Belle crying, tears streaming down his face as he couldn't hold back. Saraphima stroked his head as a gesture of consolation and said that no matter what happened, everything would definitely be okay, because he had a sister who loved him no matter what. The boy's eyes widened as his tears continued to flow, but he did not utter a word. The older brother, a white-haired boy named Zane, burst into the room, opening the front doors wide, declaring that he had noticed that the mongrels were getting along well, and clearly intending to make fun of his younger brother and sister. He smiled, realizing that he had found Belle, as he had been looking for him after the oracle ceremony. The girl fearfully squeezed her brother's shoulder with her hands, and he frowned when he saw Zane, and was clearly not happy. The white-haired boy said that he had heard everything about what happened. He leaned on Bel's shoulder, reminding him with interest that something interesting had happened at the ceremony, which meant that the priest had told Zane everything. So he had come to mock the blue-haired boy, because such a pastime was the favorite pastime of the second son of the catastrophe family. Bel answered honestly that he received the scabbard. Zane snorted in disdain when he heard this information, after which he laughed, because the scabbard is not even a weapon, but for a mongrel like Bel, they are quite suitable since he is not worthy of more in his eyes. The white-haired boy asked how his younger brother was going to fight with the scabbard, since it wasn't even a full-fledged divine weapon that was usually obtained through the oracle ceremony in their noble family. Bel's hand clenched into a fist, expressing his anger. He told his older brother to take back his harsh words, fighting back for the first time in his life. Zane asked him back, confused, as he had not expected such a bold reaction in the form of some kind of resistance. The blue-haired boy repeated his order, louder this time, so that Zane would be absolutely sure of what he heard. The eldest son of the catastrophe family indignantly asked if Bel dared to be insolent to him. This had never happened to him before. He raised his fist, claiming that he would teach his younger brother how to talk to older children. Bel swung his fist. He hit Zane with a powerful punch to the stomach. The white-haired boy doubled over in pain and began to cough. He fell to his knees, still coughing, as the blow was strong and unexpected. Bel said he warned him not to dare to offend or insult his sister. Zane insulted the boy by calling him a very rude word. He told me not to play these stupid, naive games with him. The eldest son claimed that he would make Bel cry and beg for forgiveness, and if he did not obey, then Zane would roast him with his spear, and he was confident of his future victory. It was the igniting fire spear, Zane's personal divine weapon. Bel told his sister to step back because he wanted to protect her. He stroked Saraphima's head, assuring her that everything was fine. The boy asked to provide everything to him, as he was going to deal with the offender. He summoned his Avalon, his special weapon. His divine scabbard appeared in his hands. Zane asked if the boy really believed that he could defeat him with this scabbard, since this thing could not even be called a full-fledged weapon. The elder brother was an E-rank paladin, so he was confident of his victory, because logically he should be stronger than his younger and pathetic brother. Bel remembered that he knew about this information, ranks, and powers. Paladins are divided into ranks depending on their strength. When you receive a divine weapon, you are assigned F rank. As soon as you manage to pour your mana into it, it is assigned rank E. D rank can only use special attacks. To rise to rank B, you need to awaken the unique abilities of the divine weapon. Zane was so proud that he had achieved E rank at 14 years old, but he still had a lot of room to grow. He was not super strong and powerful yet. Bel chuckled softly at his opponent's self-confidence. The eldest son indignantly and loudly asked what his interlocutor was laughing at. The blue-haired boy said, wanting to tease his interlocutor, that Zane was acting very cute. He swung his divine fire spear in an offended manner and shouted that he would show Bel where his place was. Saraphima screamed in fear, worried about her brother, because she had already seen how Zane had ruined Bel's life more than once. The blue-haired boy waved his hand over his scabbard, commanding the Sword of Light to appear. He summoned Calibarn, and a giant magical dagger appeared in his hand. A look of horror crossed Zane's face as his opponent knocked the spear out of his hands, leaving him disarmed. He wondered what kind of sword it was and where it came from. Zane fell to the floor, the shaft of a spear broken in half in his hands. The red-black blade flew up some distance, but slightly changed the direction of its flight, after which the tip fell between the white-haired boy's legs, causing him to squeal in surprise. He couldn't believe his eyes because Bel's scabbard was originally empty, and now he was using a divine weapon that appeared out of nowhere. The blue-haired boy came closer, asking, "What now? What will happen next? Will Zane make him cry and beg for forgiveness like he promised just recently?" The older brother accused Bel of deception, since he did not know that he had a weapon, and hiding the weapon was a dishonest move in his opinion. The white-haired boy said that the younger brother would face consequences, and clearly not good ones. He ran out of the room through the open doors, intending to run and complain to the Duke, his father. Bel ran after him, asking where his brother was running, since they hadn't finished talking. The blue-haired boy summoned the flame gun Ragnarok, a firearm. He fired one loud, fast, powerful shot. Zane quickly ran forward, frightened by what had happened. The bullet flew past the running boy's ear without hitting him, but this projectile came close. It left a hole with cracks in the surface. Zane stared in shock at the hole in the wall in front of him, which created cracks in the wall. "What?" the boy thought in amazement, shifting his gaze. Bel had a gun in his hands, which was a surprising fact. The older brother was surprised by this, because the blue-haired boy had a sword before. This was surprising, because Belle could not have had several divine weapons. The younger brother told Zane not to contact him or Sarah again, unless he wanted to face the consequences. He told his older brother to remember this, pointing a gun at him and clearly threatening the boy. Fear appeared on Zane's face. Belle said that if he touched his sister again, he would get a bullet in the forehead, which was not a joke, but a serious threat. The white-haired boy ran out of the room screaming. He was horrified by what had happened. Saraphima was shocked by what happened and spoke about it, admiring her blue-haired brother. Belle asked if she was okay. The girl was initially afraid that Zane would beat them again and asked if it was her brother's divine weapon. The blue-haired boy asked if he hadn't said before that he would sort everything out. He did as he promised. Saraphima said with delight and a sincere smile that her brother was incredible. Belle wouldn't let anyone wipe the smile off her face. A male adult voice asked Zane if this was true. The boy confirmed his words to his father, addressing him as his lord, Duke Galleon. Catastrophe, a gray-haired bearded man, realized that Belle had obtained several divine weapons. Kneeling, Zane said that his little brother had an unusual weapon. Perhaps he made a deal with the devil. The boy believed that they should expel Belle now. His father, however, was interested in this whole situation. He stood up and walked past his son. Zane asked where he was going, and the Duke replied that he was going to visit Belle. The man needed to see what was being told with his own eyes. Belle exhaled with his eyes closed. He fell face down on his bed, assuming a lying position. Even though the boy managed to defeat Zane, he was still in the body of a child. Belle was completely exhausted and had difficulty controlling his mana. He was going to shoot a fire bullet, but he only managed to shoot a normal one. Right now, the boy was only strong at the E rank level. This could not go on any longer. Belle remembered events from the past, the Civil War. Then the Rothwindsor family attacked them. This was another famous family that the Catastrophe family had a long feud with, so the reason for their attack could have been anything. Belle was sure that the dark figure who killed him and his sister was a man from the Rothwindsor family. This time the boy promised to protect Saraphima, but to do this he needs to raise his status in this house. The doors to the rooms swung open. Lying on the bed, Belle turned towards the entrance. Duke Galleon entered and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. The boy wondered what his father was doing here. His father was the Duke of Catastrophe. In the great battle that took place 20 years ago, the Duke fought alone against the evil god and the famous monster Tartaros. He traveled through the dark continent where monsters live and was called the Holy Sword of Genesis. Galleon's eldest son also came with him. Belle understood everything. This meant that the Duke knew something, but this was even good in Belle's opinion. The best way to improve his status is to make his father pay attention to him. The boy knelt down, respectfully greeting the Duke. Galleon Catastrophe said that the youngest son had truly changed. The man said that he came today as Belle's father, offering to talk. The boy was afraid that one wrong word and the conversation would get out of control. They must be responsible for their own words and actions. The Duke chuckled thoughtfully after hearing these words. He ordered his youngest son to rise from his knees. The man decided to support Belle if he really thought so. The boy felt the pressure. The Duke's gaze was terrifying as he asked if Zane and Belle had ever fought when the man had banned fighting in his house. So why did the blue-haired boy hurt the brother he was supposed to respect? A bead of sweat ran down Belle's face and he became nervous. Zane smiled evilly as he looked at this, thinking that his brother was finished. No one in this house could stand up to my father. Belle frowned. He replied that he got angry then because his older brother was bullying his younger sister. Galleon understood this and asked if the boy had broken the rules because of a small offense. Belle agreed with this, and he did not regret it. The Duke clutched his sword, asking if his son really did not regret breaking his rules. The boy replied that abandoning those you love is a real shame for a paladin. He will protect his sister even if his opponent is his older brother. The man listened to him thoughtfully. This is the knight's path chosen by Belle. The Duke drew his sword and pointed the tip at his son's neck. He asked whether the boy would stick to this path if his father became his opponent. Belle confirmed that he would protect the girl from Galleon as well. The man thought about these words. He definitely enjoyed it. So the Duke said he would pretend nothing had happened, which startled his eldest son standing nearby. Galleon Catastrophe then turned to Zane, asking if it was true that he not only lost the fight with his brother, but also bullied his sister. The white-haired boy panicked when he saw his father's reaction. The man shouted that it was a disgrace and ordered his eldest son not to show his face again. After that, the father turned to Belle. He understood the child, and it was a brave act to express his opinion, understanding what could follow. The boy bowed his head, asking for forgiveness. But Galleon replied that there was no need for an apology, because for the Catastrophe family it was very wonderful. Now the Duke wants his son to show his full strength. The man told the boy to reveal his divine armament. Bel agreed with his father's wishes. He raised his palms, between which a round blue light was already glowing. Doubt appeared on Galleon Catastrophe's face. The boy held his scabbard between his hands, saying that this was his divine armament, called Avalon. The amazed man thought it was impossible. He had heard of the legendary divine armament, which contained the spirit of the first paladin, the very same divine armament passed down from generation to generation by the greatest heroes. The Duke said that his eldest son mentioned that Bel used both a sword and a gun, and asked if what he said was true, and the boy agreed with what he said. The youngest son extended the scabbard forward. He said that both of his weapons were inside these scabbards. The boy showed both the gun and the sword. The Duke was surprised by the display of the divine armament. Bel explained that he could use 2 weapons at once, but the scabbard had 3 more types, which amazed his father even more. The Duke was amazed that his son was a future hero. The man said that he was not interested in weaklings. He will expect a lot from his youngest son. So the Duke ordered the boy to work harder and turned around, clearly intending to leave. The dark wooden door into the room slammed loudly. Bel sat down next to the bed, exhaled and put his hand on his forehead. He felt his father pressing on him with his aura. But now, Galleon Catastrophe expects a lot from his son, and the child must show his strength, even though he remains a child. The boy needed to get D rank as soon as possible, and he had to wait for as many monsters as possible while increasing his mana. Bel confidently decided to start by hunting orcs in the forest. It was a dark night outside, the sky was deep blue, and there was a big, round white moon on it. A giant, ugly green goblin head oozed blood as it lay severed on the ground. A large amount of dark red blood spurted out again. Something light blue flashed over another orc corpse lying on the ground. The light silhouette of an animal passed by. The creature's predatory fangs were covered in blood. A huge blue and white wolf opened its mouth, its red eye glowing in the eerie darkness. This forest was very memorable during the day. After Bel was banished from home in his past life, he trained here. But strangely, the boy went into the very depths where all the monsters are. 2 red eyes sparkled in the thicket of bushes. Bel didn't even meet an orc once during his entire journey. It was at this moment that he came across scraps and pieces of orc corpses. A look of fear appeared on the blue-haired boy's face. He heard a sound like a scream behind him. Bel turned sharply at the noise. He thrust forward the sword that had appeared in his hands. Something hitting the blade of the weapon caused the child to lose his footing and fall to the ground. Bel wondered what it was. In front of him stood a giant, red-eyed white and blue wolf. As the boy had expected, it was Fenrir. Now Bel understood the reason why he didn't meet any monsters. He only wanted to hunt orcs, not run into a D-rank monster. The boy had almost no mana. At best, he had the strength of an E rank. Honestly, Bel would just like to run away as quickly as possible, but as soon as he turns away, Fenrir will kill him. The red-eyed beast's pupil narrowed. The boy's eyes widened in fear. This monster was too fast. Fenrir jumped towards Bel, but he jumped back, dodging the dangerous monster. The boy summoned Ragnarok and a gun appeared in his palm. Bel fired quickly without getting up from the ground. The giant wolf touched the ground with its paws and quickly turned around. The boy cursed when he saw this. Bel's bullets were too slow due to lack of mana. He realized that the gun wouldn't work in this situation, so he summoned a blade, which obediently appeared in his hand, causing the firearm to disappear. The boy ran towards the monster, holding his big, long sword in his hands. The beast swung its clawed, hairy paw. Fenrir tried to hit the child, but he managed to bend down and deftly dodge. Bel held his weapon tightly, preparing to attack, while the monster looked at him with a predatory red gaze. The boy swung his blade, but the wolf deftly jumped back, dodging. Bel was puzzled by such a sharp action from his opponent. The beast looked at the boy, standing at a distance and wagging its tail. Bel knew that in his past life, he could have killed this monster with ease. The monster opened its mouth and rushed forward towards the boy. In this guise, Bel realized that he could not cope with the dangerous predatory beast, because he simply could not keep up with it. The boy thrust the blade of his sword forward, trying to repel another attack from the monster. The paw strike left a scratch on Bel's leg, tearing his pant leg. This made the boy gasp in pain. The beast circled around the child, which was bad because he couldn't dodge. The boy screamed loudly and in horror. The monster opened its giant, wide, toothy mouth. Bel was worried. He had just reincarnated and had no intention of dying here. He summoned Achilles, a large light green shield. The boy covered himself with his shield, but did not let go of the blade when the belly of the jumping creature flew over him. Bell turned his blue eyes back. The beast pushed him from behind, causing the boy to cry out in surprise. Bell fell to the ground, dropping his shield and blade from his hands. His weapon fell to the ground, flying some distance away from the child. Bell understood that if things continued like this, he would die. His sword, his shield, and even his blade were useless in a fight with this dangerous D-rank large monster. The boy was also sure that he would not be able to strike with his hammer. He had no choice, and there was only one weapon left. Bell would have to use it. The monster ran towards the child again at full speed. The boy closed his eyes and began to summon his only remaining weapon. The monster swung its paw with bright turquoise claws at the man in front of it. The child opened his light blue eyes, calling out loudly for Aegis. The dangerous beast pounced on the spot in front of him where Bell stood, hoping to catch and kill him. But the boy stood in the same place, safe and sound. Bell had a bulky dark purple glove on his hand with two predatory eyes on it. He really didn't want to use this weapon. But in such a situation, the boy could not act otherwise. The monster's paw touched the ground, stepping forward. The monster growled loudly, becoming faster and rushing forward with a loud roar. Bell considered the situation. Ferner rushed at the man in front of him, opening his mouth, intending to bite the child in half, but he managed to jump back, not allowing himself to be torn apart by fangs. Bell apologized, finding himself on the monster's back. A large hammer already in his hands, but the glove was still there. The wolf would not be able to hit the boy again. Bell swung, raising his elbow high. The child hit Fenrir's face with his hammer as hard as he could. The beast roared from the sharp and sudden pain, and the boy took advantage of the moment and jumped off the monster's back onto the ground. Aegis, the glove of darkness, it increases a person's physical abilities in an instant. But the glove's features were not limited to this. Bell uttered the word destruction, and both the object and the boy's eyes lit up with a bright red color. The enraged wolf ran forward, not intending to give up. Over time, the glove becomes stronger, so the child, confident in his new powers, suggested that the monster say goodbye to life. Bell smiled and told the monster to attack, insulting him. The boy attacked the beast, attacking from all sides, not giving it a chance to defend itself or attack. The child jumped up, swinging his hammer at the four-legged furry enemy. Bell had a cruel but satisfied smile on his face. The monster fell on its side, defeated by the man and no longer a threat. Bell was glad that he managed to quickly deal with the enemy, looking at his hand, which began to change. The Dark Divine weapon has special abilities, but the more time it is used in battle, the deeper it sucks the owner into the abyss of darkness. The boy knelt down in front of the monster's corpse and wondered where Fenrir had come from in the forest, because he was sure that this creature had not been here before. Bell thought it didn't matter. There was no point in worrying about it, and then turned his attention to his sparkling hammer. The boy realized something while looking at this sight. After defeating Fenrir, Bell could use his attributes to hunt strong monsters more effectively than entire hordes of weak opponents. The child was looking forward to the opportunity to try out new abilities. Saraphima sat under a tree on the hill in front of their family's ducal estate, the sun shining brightly on the green vegetation on the ground. But the girl remained in the shade thanks to the thick foliage above her head. Saraphima smiled happily, lifting the just-finished wreath of white flowers from her lap. She giggled, wondering if her beloved brother would like her creation. Someone's hand suddenly snatched the wreath from the girl's palms. Jessica asked rudely what this nonsense flower crown was. She said sarcastically that such a crown might well suit such a pathetic half-breed as Saraphima. The younger girl looked at her older sister in horror. Jessica asked her companion Spencer what he thought about the wreath. The guy with purple hair thrown up and an evil smile said that what his companion said was the pure truth. Jessica threw the wreath to the guy, addressing the guy. The flower wreath was torn into two halves by a blue flash. Spencer held a blue magical whip in his hand. Seraphima gasped in fear. Jessica said she was incredibly bored. So the blonde girl suggested that her younger sister have some fun, and a magical divine pistol appeared in her hand. Jessica said with a smile that it was time for shooting practice. She fired with a loud sound. Seraphima squealed in fear, dodging. She opened her eyes and found that they had been closed by Bell, who suddenly appeared, put forward his divine scabbard, and offered to play together with his older sister since she had played. Seraphima was surprised by the sudden appearance of her beloved brother. The blue-haired boy said that he was just looking for an opportunity to test his divine weapon. Jessica asked what he was trying to do here. She said that no mongrel or half-breed would stand in the way of her fun. Seraphima grabbed her brother's shoulder in fear. The boy apologized to his sister for being very scared by this situation, but everything was fine. Bell narrowed his eyes at his opponents. Spencer insulted the boy and asked how he dared to even look at Mistress Jessica. Belle assumed that this guy was serving the blonde girl. He said that it was too rough a way of speaking for someone dealing with the Duke's son. Spencer chuckled as he said that he was showing his respect to the concubine's son. The blue-haired boy frowned. Jessica said with a sly smile that Belle was too young and asked what happened, then said that he managed to defeat Zane, so the blue-haired boy got carried away. Spencer said that Zane was too careless. The older sister didn't think that he could lose to someone as trashy as Belle. It could have been a fluke. How difficult the task was to lose to some scabbard. Belle asked why the older girl didn't just look after herself, and at the same time think about whether it really was luck or not. The fair-haired girl narrowed her eyes in displeasure. Jessica loudly ordered her servant to sort out the trash, by which she meant her younger brother and sister. Spencer obediently grabbed his glowing magic whip, a smile on his face. The tip of his whip touched the green grass. The vegetation turned into a piece of ice. Belle looked at his opponent carefully. He recognized him. It was Spencer Gray. The guy was a D-rank paladin whose divine weapon was the ice whip, meaning Spencer was much stronger than Zane, who was only an E-rank. Belle narrowed his eyes thinking about it. Jessica's companion said he would freeze the boy's legs so he couldn't run away, then freeze his arms and torso so the child couldn't move a single finger. After this, Spencer was going to disfigure his victim's face beyond recognition. Belle mimicked his interlocutor and declared that all he could do was talk nonsense. For the tears shed by Sarah, Spencer and Jessica will have to suffer. The guy told Belle not to look at him like that. Spencer declared that the boy would turn into an icicle and swung his divine whip. The whip whistled past Belle's ear. Jessica was very surprised that her younger half-blood brother managed to dodge such a blow. For a D rank, Spencer had good control over his weapon. But compared to the training Belle had undergone in his past life, what was happening now was kindergarten. Saraphima was delighted with her brother's actions, comparing them to dance movements. Spencer said the boy was simply running away from him, turn after turn. Belle chuckled when he heard these words. He agreed, deciding that he would no longer dodge. All three were surprised, both sisters and the guy. Belle was curious how Spencer was going to turn him into an icicle and do other things he promised earlier. The guy said that Jessica's younger brother was even dumber than he had previously thought. Spencer promised that, as the boy wished, he would freeze him to death. He swung his whip towards Belle, who had spread his arms out to the sides. The whip flew writhing towards the boy's body. Saraphima screamed in fear. Belle's legs were trapped in blocks of ice. The boy's hands and even his body began to freeze slightly. Spencer chuckled, explaining that his opponent was now immobilized, which opened up some options for him. Belle asked if that was all the boy could do. It was the blue-haired boy's turn. Spencer frowned, not understanding what was going on. Belle raised his ice-bound hand and called forth Ragnarok with a loud cry. The scabbard hanging at his side glowed white. The boy's divine pistol appeared in his hands. Spencer was shocked by the appearance of the second divine weapon. Belle pointed the gun at his other, still frozen hand and shouted, "Mana release!" A bright yellow flame flared from the barrel of Ragnarok's pistol. Now that the ice had melted, Belle could move again. Jessica couldn't believe her eyes. Why did her little brother have two weapons, and how could he use the weapon's attributes? Belle said that it was time to pay for what had been done. A fiery volley emerged from the muzzle of Ragnarok. Fear appeared on Spencer's face. His whip writhed again, creating an ice flow for self-defense. Spencer's silhouette was visible in the ice flow, with a displeased look on his face. The boy laughed, confident that Belle wouldn't be able to hit through that thick ice. The boy said it was as easy as pie. He fired his pistol again. The fiery projectile pierced the ice flow and flew into Spencer's face. Horror and bewilderment appeared in the guy's eyes. A fireball hit him in the stomach. Spencer flew back with a loud scream. He fell to the ground with the grass. Jessica stared at his body in horror. The blonde girl understood that Belle had broken the ice. Was he really stronger than a D rank? Jessica herself was an E rank. In this situation, the girl had no chance. The blue-haired boy walked towards his older sister. He said it was all over. The girl squealed in fear, putting her hand forward. She took her divine pistol with trembling hands and fearfully ordered Belle to go away. Jessica fired several times, but the projectiles flew past the blue-haired boy's head. The girl screamed in fear for Belle to get away from her. She took a step back. Jessica tripped as she stepped back and fell onto the grass. The younger brother took a step towards her. The girl gasped in fear. Her pupils narrowed. Belle's silhouette seemed scary, dark and threatening to her. The boy ordered Jessica never to approach Saraphima again. Tears appeared in the blonde girl's eyes and she looked like a beaten, pathetic puppy. She rose from the ground and ran away with a scream of horror. Healed footsteps rushed towards Belle. Saraphima suddenly pounced on him with jubilant embraces. The girl worriedly asked if he was okay and if he was hurt. But her brother replied that everything was okay, and most importantly, that she herself was safe. Saraphima was delighted with how her brother fought. She noticed that he was strong. The boy promised to become even stronger to protect his dear and beloved sister. The girl remembered that she had managed to make wreaths, but one was missing, so she decided to give the remaining wreath to her brother, even though she had made it for herself. She placed her flower creation on her brother's head, thanking him for always protecting her. It was a gift from his sister. Belle smiled widely, thinking that one day the entire nation would honor him. But there were still some problems. Even the knights and servants despised them for being the children of a concubine. And even though Jessica and Zane were defeated, it wouldn't change anything. After some time, the older brother and sister will start bullying Saraphima again, hurting her in every possible way. So as the girl's brother, Belle must show his status in the house to protect her. That was all the boy needed now. It was still daylight, bright and sunny all around, and the estate building shone with blue roofs. Duke Catastrophe stood under a tree, holding a sword in his hands. His eyes were closed and his face was calm. The wind carried a small green leaf forward. Galleon swung his weapon sharply and menacingly. The sheet was cut lengthwise into thin pieces. Behind the man stood his youngest son. The Duke asked what Belle needed. The boy replied that he simply wanted to ask the man for permission. Galleon Catastrophe asked what kind of permission his son needed. Belle dropped to one knee in front of his father. The man watched the child closely with his eyes. The blue-haired boy asked for permission to take the exam to obtain C rank. The Duke was surprised that Belle wanted to take the exam. The boy replied that he wanted to serve the king as a member of their family. In exchange for the royal family's recognition of their status, the ducal family is required to carry out royal duties. Usually the tasks are given like protecting important people, destroying monsters, and other similar things. But among these, there was also one very fast way to improve your status in the family. This method was to get achievements for difficult tasks. And to accept such tasks, a higher rank was needed. The Duke saw that his youngest son was full of ambition. But Galleon still believed that it was still too early. The man explained that one had to become a full-fledged paladin before reaching C rank. Belle is currently only at F rank, as he just received his divine weapon. Galleon Catastrophe stated that if the boy wanted to advance in rank, he should start with the E rank exam. Belle handed the man the giant fang he had been carrying in a makeshift bag made from a piece of light fabric, thinking it would change the adult's mind. It was Fenrir's fang, which surprised the Duke. He asked how the boy got such a rare thing. Belle extended his palm forward. A large war hammer appeared in one of the boy's hands. This hammer sparkled with small lightning bolts across its large part. Belle said that, although with difficulty, he managed to defeat Fenrir. His father was surprised that he could use attributes. This meant that the boy had received the weapon's properties and had defeated Fenrir single-handedly. He was clearly stronger than a C rank. Galleon Catastrophe was ready to allow his son to take the exam. He also told the boy not to disappoint his father. Belle confirmed that he would not do so. There were a lot of people near the round building, and someone in the crowd said that there were enough candidates here. Probably for many, C rank was a kind of ceiling. There were rumors that victims happened every year, and many guys were interested in how the exam goes. Two grown men noticed something strange among the local crowd. Belle walked past them, and they were surprised by the fact that he was a child. The boy approached the girl standing behind the counter and asked if they were accepting orders here. She in turn asked who he was and whether he had an escort. Belle replied that he wanted to pass the exam, which amazed his interlocutor. She said with excitement that he would have to come back later when he grew up. Belle asked not to be treated like a child because he was also a paladin. The girl chuckled thoughtfully and uncertainly when someone's voice said that it was enough to play paladins. The red-haired youth said that there was no place for small children here and told the boy to get out of here. Belle became nervous, wondering who this guy was and realizing that he would not be easy to deal with. All the people turned their attention to this self-confident man in a green cloak. It was the strongest D-rank paladin named Lennox Bright. His divine weapon was the grass sword, rumored to hit 8 times with each swing. It was incredible, and this paladin had his own big fans. This guy said that if Belle wanted to get a C rank, he had to be at least a little bit as strong as him, Lennox himself. The blue-haired boy thought about the fact that this man was the strongest in this rank. Lennox leaned over to the child, wondering if he even had a divine weapon. Belle confirmed this by showing his divine scabbard. The guy snorted contemptuously. He didn't believe that the boy's weapon was some stupid, pathetic scabbard, considering such a thing nothing more than trash. Some guy in the crowd was surprised that such a useless divine weapon existed, and some girl was glad that she wasn't born as useless. Lennox Bright didn't mind if the foolish child was going to die here, but he didn't like the fact that Belle's participation in this exam couldn't put them on equal terms. The guy suggested that the boy run to his mother, moving away from him. Belle turned back to the girl behind the counter, asking her to check him in immediately. The girl asked if he was serious. The boy confirmed his words. To participate, you must either be a D-rank paladin or have a letter of recommendation from a B-rank paladin or higher. So Belle handed the girl an envelope, claiming that with this letter he would definitely be able to participate, as the rules said. The interlocutor wondered who could recommend this boy. She was shocked to realize that it was a letter from Duke Galleon Catastrophe. The boy in front of her was the Duke's son, which explained some things, but not all. The whole situation was still unusual. A crowd of people stood on the street. The man on stage was about to explain how the C-rank exam worked. First, the examinees will go to the dungeon using the teleportation stone that has already been brought here to fulfill its task. Then they will need to return the light gemstone on the 5th floor in 5 hours, and no one will give them more time. There are 3 of these blue round stones in total. 3 people who complete the task will receive C rank, and this statement surprised many of the examinees, because the number of those who pass the exam will be too small, which is unthinkable. Bright was confident that he would become one of this trinity, and he hastened to declare it very loudly and as noticeably as possible. People looked at the self-confident guy with doubt. The examinees were asked if they were all ready for the test with the maze and fights with monsters. The exam was declared to have begun. Belle extended his palm forward. The teleportation stone illuminated everything with a bright, blinding blue light. The boy felt his own fall, and this sensation surprised him. He fell to his knees on the hard surface and quickly began to look around, assessing the place he had ended up in, which turned out to be a stone room resembling a cave. Belle assumed that they were all sent to different places on this floor. Now he had to think about where to go and which path to take in order to pass his exam and raise his status. The dungeon is huge, but 5 hours is enough to clear it. The boy had a chance. The main thing was not to waste time, because time is a very valuable thing. There are many monsters in the dungeon. The paladin's mana becomes stronger depending on the number of monsters killed, which was a good feature of the Mafia. Belle's trusty blade appeared in his hand. He was going to kill all the monsters here and get as much mana as possible. 3 warriors being tested fought a crowd of opponents. These opponents were humanoid lizards in armor, with blades and shields in their hands. One of them defeated the man, and 2 warriors remained, a guy and a girl. These lizards grinned angrily at the people and were clearly not in a friendly mood. The people being examined were horrified as they looked at their enemies and did not know what to do about it. Lennox cut one of the monsters into pieces, saying they were pathetic. The guy smiled self-confidently, because he was self-confident. One of the 3 people called Bright a good guy and called him Renox. And the girl in their team said that she was even ready to fall in love with such a cool paladin. Lennox continued to chop the monsters into pieces with his grass blade. He said it was obvious because he wasn't like the couple of guys he saved. He clearly thought he was special and cool. The girl and the boy agreed with him, claiming that unfortunately this was the case. But thanks to Lennox, they were able to move forward and survive. The young man grinned and told them to look at him with envy in that case, since they were so incapable and weak. He believed that weaklings had better act like weaklings like these guys were supposed to. The trio of people reached a large, long, bright door. This was the last room, so anything could await them. Bright hoped that there was something interesting and valuable in it. Maybe there were even spheres leading to the end of the rank exam. The room behind the door contained many different D-rank monsters, but despite their diversity, they were all equally hostile. In the back of the room there was an altar, in which one could certainly find something valuable for passing the exam. The stone foot of one of the monsters hit the stone floor with a loud thud. This monster was heading purposefully towards the trio of warriors. Bright was about to blow all his enemies to smithereens in a matter of seconds again. He swung his grass blade, a worthy and powerful weapon. Lennox found his opponent to be tough, which is why he remained unharmed and, most importantly, alive. The monster swung its heavy fist. Its attack must have been powerful. With all its might, the monster brought down its blow on Bright, who had been so self-confident until that moment, causing his confidence to be undermined very quickly. Lennox coughed and screamed as he flew some distance away from his opponent. He was puzzled that his sword could not cut through the enemy. The guy's companions were also puzzled and frightened. They also began to be attacked by various monsters of all kinds from all sides. The boy swung his weapon, hoping to damage the creature. He cut the blue monster in front of him into 2 halves, after which this creature began to recover very quickly, since attacks with blows did not work on it. The girl couldn't reach the predatory purple-feathered flying humanoid creature above her with her sword. The monster waved its wing at the girl, causing her to scream. Bright wondered, as he looked at this battle, if this was the final room for the C-rank exam. The stone fat man looked menacing, and in this room there were only monsters with resistance to one particular weapon, which significantly complicated the rapidly approaching battle. The monster swung his fist at Lennox, who was sitting on the floor after falling. He closed his eyes in horror and covered himself with his hand. He was already sure that they would be killed, and their life would end within the walls of the labyrinth for the exam. But the monster was broken into stone chips by the huge hammer of Bell, who suddenly appeared. Bright opened his eyes slightly, not understanding what was happening. The boy exhaled, saying that he was almost late. He placed his foot on the head of the defeated monster and said that he had been too busy killing all the small monsters. The red-haired boy shouted, "Be careful!" A blue, red-eyed monster, resembling a jelly creature, rushed forward, opening its toothy mouth. A light blue light began to shine in Bell's hand. A large, beautiful blade appeared in the same hand. Lennox was shocked that this child's weapon was able to change. The boy did not hesitate, and with a quick swing of his sword cut the attacking creature into pieces. A fast, winged monster was already rushing towards him from above. Bell summoned Ragnarok and a gun appeared in his hand. The gunshot left 3 round holes in the flying creature. The 2 warriors were surprised and shocked, not believing that this was all serious, and that the boy's weapon was not just some blade. Lennox wondered where this kid got so many weapons. In addition, the boy was good at it, all types. There was no time left, so Bell decided to finish quickly and began to skillfully wield a sword and firearms, deftly dodging the monsters. Bright could even think that this was not an ordinary child in front of him. The boy deftly cut down the last enemy. After this, Bell, having defeated all the monsters, went up the stairs to the altar. There lay 3 light round blue spheres. The 2 warriors followed the boy with admiration. They were terribly interested in how he was able to defeat all the opponents single-handedly and how he carried so many weapons with him. Bell frowned as he listened to these questions. The 2 warriors turned to Bright, who remained behind. They said it wasn't cool, this guy acted all cocky but lost like a total wimp. Lennox sighed sadly, looking down. The 2 warriors remembered the spheres and were glad that they could now be called C-rank warriors. Bell suddenly summoned his giant hammer Mjolnir. He took one of the spheres from the holes in the altar. The boy swung the hammer. He brought his weapon down with all his might on the altar, crushing it, turning it into real pieces and crumbs. The 2 warriors cried out in fear when they saw this. They indignantly asked what the child was doing, why he had broken the altar. Bell pointed to the sphere in his hand, saying that there was still 1 sphere left. If they wanted, they could try to take this important thing for the exam. He called the pair pathetic people, incapable of anything other than flattering strong warriors. And the boy called Bright a pathetic person who enjoys humiliating others. Bell considered them all to be people unworthy of being called knights, which was the reason he broke the remaining spheres. A look of confusion appeared on Lennox's face, and a certain pity and sadness appeared on the faces of a couple of warriors. Realizing how true what was said was, the boy walked down the stairs, having said everything he wanted and essentially done everything he wanted to. Lennox said, lowering his head, that he knew he was weak, but too self-confident, and thanked Bell for making him notice it. But the guy had no intention of stopping. At least that's what he claimed. Bell had not expected this emerging honor and ambition in this man, Lennox Bright. The boy said before leaving that they would meet again someday. He was now a C rank as well, something Bell thought about as he emerged from the labyrinth to take the exam. Thanks to the monsters, the boy's magical power became stronger. He felt it, touching his hand, needing it. Only his dearest younger sister Saraphima remained, for whose protection he had raised his status with this exam, testing his strength and endurance. It was a bright, sunny day at the Catastrophe estate, but the people gathered to discuss important matters clearly had no time for it. Duke Galleon sat at the head of a long table, at which, besides him, sat 2 other men, and on the table itself stood a vase with beautiful white flowers. One of the people at the table asked if this meant that the knightly organization Karma was plotting a royal coup, to which he received a positive answer confirming these words. They approached this kingdom with 3 knights of the rank at their head, and the destruction of this organization became the mission of the Catastrophe Duke family. The bearded man said that it looked like they had already defeated Count Slave's platoon, and the second man, with sideburns, asked him about it again, repeating his question. Rumors said that they strengthened their weapons with the Forbidden Book of Pentagrams. This thing was magical and unusual. That is why the B-rank knights were gathered here for such an important meeting. The Duke believed that they needed to keep an eye on Karma, and then they would defeat this knightly organization. One of his interlocutors asked where the absent Lord Jin the eldest son of the Duke of Catastrophe's family was, so he was an important person for the gathering here. Someone's voice said that he understood what his father was talking about and threw a purple magic book on the table. The gazes of the three people present were fixed on the person who entered the room, a tall young man. A long-haired, dark-haired, pale youth claimed that he had recently destroyed this organization single-handedly. This guy called himself the next Count, which made some sense since he was the eldest son of the Catastrophe family. At this time, in another room of the estate, a somewhat different atmosphere reigned, quieter and not overshadowed by such important and serious conversations. The maid placed the tray on the hard surface, the contents of which were modest: a piece of bread, a cup of tea, and a glass of water. She informed the lady that she had brought her lunch. Sitting on the bed, Saraphima watched the servants. She spoke her words of gratitude awkwardly, accustomed to such treatment. The maid did not deign to answer the girl and took her food tray cart out of the room, leaving the child alone with the food she had brought. The girl's face immediately became saddened by the way she was being treated. She looked at the food brought to her, which was too simple and meager. Saraphima sat with her hands folded on the hem of her cute pink dress, lost in her dark, not cheerful thoughts. The doors opened and Belle entered the room and said that he was back, holding a box in his hands. A kind smile was visible on the blue-haired boy's face. Sarah's face immediately lit up with a happy smile. She ran to meet her brother, asking where he had been and saying that she had been worried, but Belle apologized. He had business at the time, and in return he brought a gift. A whole roast chicken, a delicious baked pie, and 4 red ripe apples appeared on the table. The girl clapped her hands, delighted at the apple pie that was brought. She thanked her brother and, smiling sincerely, suggested that they eat it all together. Belle found the sight cute, but he had no time to be moved. His sister was brought a simple dinner as usual, probably because the old servants did not like the mistress's children. Saraphima happily chewed a piece of apple pie, while her brother thought that he needed to start working quickly to improve her life. Several dark silhouettes in the doorway were busy discussing something important. Galleon Catastrophe asked if the dark-haired boy really had defeated Karma on his own. That long-haired guy was the eldest son of the Catastrophe Duke family named Jin, and behind him stood his blonde servant Laser. And today, the eldest son had achieved rank A. The two men said that this was what was expected of Lord Garion's eldest son, as if they lived in different worlds. Jin Catastrophe sat down on one of the empty chairs at the long table for meetings and important discussions. He asked his father, who was sitting at the head of the table, if this meant that today's topic of official conversation was closed and that they had nothing more to talk about. The Duke replied that this was not all, because there was another rather important mission from the king. The mission was to protect Queen Reich Stagverine. Soon the young Lady Reich must go on a journey to Ace. The job of the Catastrophe family is to provide her with knights and make her a safe journey. The bearded man asked with displeasure whether the queen didn't have enough palace knights for this journey, of which there should be plenty in the palace. Laser, Jin's personal servant, clarified that if it weren't for Karma, the girl wouldn't have needed protection at all. The bearded man offered himself and his companion for this mission. He thought that the safest route would be through Mount Ricotta. Someone's not very loud footsteps were heard, clearly approaching the negotiation room. It was Belle who had arrived, loudly asking the adults who were busy talking to wait, because he wanted to draw their attention to his words and knowledge. Every man in the room stared at the boy standing in front of the narrow side of the long table, caught off guard by his sudden arrival, which should not have happened. The man with the sideburns asked Mr. Bell, turning to him politely, "What happened?" Galleon Catastrophe smiled slightly as he saw his youngest son. The man said, concluding that it seemed like the difficult exam to get the next rank had already ended. The boy announced, holding out a piece of paper, that he had received a C rank. The two men were very shocked by this statement. How could a child have achieved a C rank at such an age? The Duke asked his son what he wanted now, whether he had any goals or wishes. Bell had some good advice for his interlocutor's path. The bearded man asked about this advice doubtfully, not sure if they would need the child's opinion. The boy said that there were no monsters on Mount Ricotta, but it was a great place for robbers to hide, and if you went along the road in the mountains, it would take 3 days to get there. So the child thought and said that it was worth driving through a whole meadow of monsters. The bearded man shouted indignantly that the meadow was a real nest of various and terrible monsters. Bell objected to him because he had something to say about this information. This meadow is inhabited mainly by Deskimales and dark spirits. There are no other types of creatures there. Both of these monsters are nocturnal creatures, making it safe to travel during the day, making the task of protecting the girl easier. Thus, in the boy's opinion, it would be possible to get there in a day, which is much faster. The man sheepishly agreed with him. deciding that it did make sense. The Duke realized that his son knew the situation and could speak to the point. Belle was asked a question, well, what does he mean by this? The boy asked that this important mission given by the king be entrusted to him. He is ready to deliver the princess by a quick and safe route. His father chuckled thoughtfully as he listened to this and thought about it. Jin, who had remained silent until this point, suddenly spoke up, wanting to speak out. Belle felt something bad, gloomy, and dark. Jin believed that a mongrel like the boy in front of him should not interfere in these matters, since he was not worthy of participating in such important things. The white flowers standing in a vase on the table instantly wilted due to the atmosphere in the room, becoming tense and deteriorating in a matter of seconds. The two men remained silent and watched the proceedings nervously, as they knew the nasty and gloomy character of the eldest son of the catastrophe family. This is greatness. Belle hasn't seen this guy for a long time, but still, the older brother is different from everyone else. The boy's hand trembled and clenched into a fist. The child raised his palm up, pointed it at his brother, and said that he didn't come here to make jokes. Belle's trusty divine scabbard appeared in his hands. The boy claimed that it didn't matter who stood against him in battle. He would still protect the queen. Jin asked with an unkind smile whether Belle would also protect the queen if his older brother became the enemy. The boy said that he still hadn't changed his mind, holding his hand with his scabbard out in front of him. Laser warned him to be careful. After all, Jin took this as an insult towards himself. Belle recalled what he knew about his older brother's servant. The blonde boy was a B-rank holy knight, if of course Belle's memory didn't fail him. Jin smiled unkindly and widely when he heard his younger brother's answer. This intrigued him, so he asked Laser to check on the blue-haired boy, but without specifying what exactly he meant. A yellow-green handle appeared in the blonde-haired guy's hand. Two tonfas appeared in the servant's hands, which he extended crosswise. He did not understand how the boy dared to contradict him and was going to show the child his proper place. Laser took a step forward. A blue flash appeared, but Belle himself did not move from his place, continuing to stand, stretching out his hand with the divine scabbard. Laser swung his tonfa, his eyes flashing red. Belle became nervous as he was not prepared for such a quick and sharp attack. He put his sheath forward, blocking the blow and thus preventing the blonde boy from striking himself. But it was hard. Jin's servant was surprised to realize that Belle could resist his attacks. Jin himself was smiling at this moment, watching the spectacle unfolding in the room. Belle blocked the way for Laser to strike with his sword. The guy almost hit him. As he turned out to be stronger than the blue-haired boy thought, he thought that he could not win yet. A loud order was given to stop fighting in the conference room. Belle's gaze turned tensely to the source of the order. The loud voice that interrupted the fight belonged to the Duke, who had thought over everything that had been said in the room and had decided to entrust this mission to his youngest son, who had already managed to prove himself sufficiently. Laser was taken aback and asked if Galleon was sure of the catastrophe, saying such a thing and making such a decision. The boy's father believed that this mission was suitable for him, since his karma had already been destroyed anyway. Belle thanked the Duke with a satisfied smile and promised to do everything in his power. Jin's face darkened as he glanced sideways at his father. But it didn't last long, because just a moment later his face was distorted by a creepy and unkind smile that was quite common for him. The tall, light stone building rose upward with its bluish roofs. It was the Stagwarren Palace, and Belle thought that he had not been able to get here in his past life. He walked confidently forward to the gates of the palace, in front of which stood two armed and equipped knights, acting as guards. They told the boy to stop and told him that he was not allowed to go inside. Belle showed a piece of paper with a document and said that he came on a mission, and his name was Belle Catastrophe. The guards were surprised when they heard this information. Could it be that this child was the C-rank Holy Knight? Despite the fact that this situation was unusual, a couple of people opened the gates for the boy, letting him into the palace. These knights were still pondering the fact, looking at his back, that this child would serve as the princess's guard on this mission. Belle's gaze was expressionless as he walked forward. In front of the door of the blue carriage stood a tall, white-haired girl in a dark outfit, and on either side of her, two people knelt down. She said that she had quite nice security this time, referring to Belle who had come up. The girl put her hands on her hips and apologized, saying in a self-confident tone that she would not need the boy's help. The palace was illuminated by bright daylight. A young man with long blonde hair tied into a ponytail was kneeling in front of the throne when the person on the throne asked if Reich had already set out. The guy confirmed this and raised his head, revealing that half of his face was hidden behind a red mask. He informed the man on the throne that the girl would be guarded by several palace knights and a boy from the ducal family named Belle Catastrophe. The guy sitting there knew that Belle was the youngest son of the Catastrophe family, and that he was still very young. If this kid is so good, then the blonde guy should be more careful and attentive. The man on the throne allowed his subordinate to use something mysterious. The fair-haired boy obediently agreed with him. He said that killing was his profession and held out his hand with blades between his fingers, which were his weapons. The blue carriage moved forward, drawn by 2 bay horses and driven by a coachman sitting in front. Belle sat next to the girl inside the carriage, opposite the guards who accompanied the queen on the journey. The guards called to the ceremony of the first Queen Reich in another country. It sounded simple, but at the same time, it was an important mission. The boy could not fail this mission for the sake of his beloved and dear sister, but he didn't feel like he was needed in this mission. Belle asked for forgiveness and asked the queen what she meant when she said that she didn't need him. The carriage wheels turned, moving it forward. Reich replied with an indifferent look that she simply didn't want to get attached to anyone. The girl had a weapon and claimed that she was not so weak that she could not defend herself. Belle sheepishly agreed, noticing that the queen was more arrogant than he expected of her. The girl silently looked out the carriage window, not seeming interested in these conversations. She saw a marketplace there, where people were bargaining, crowding, and watching various craftsmen and actors doing their jobs and creating shows. A strand of hair on the girl's head rose up, falling out of her previously sleek hairstyle. A genuine, curious smile appeared on Rika's face as she leaned against the window, looking at everything with pleasure. Belle couldn't help but smile when he saw it either. The girl immediately turned to him and in a displeased, rude tone asked what was wrong since he started smiling. The boy politely asked for forgiveness because he simply remembered his younger sister. Belle said his sister would have reacted the same way, which surprised the queen. The girl asked if the boy often played with his sister, and he honestly answered that he often walked with Sarah. Sister Bella is still little, so for now he sometimes plays house and similar games with her. Reich thoughtfully said that for her it was the other way around. She had many brothers in the palace, but she could only trust herself. As the girl turned away, looking out the carriage window with a bored expression, Belle wondered if her last words meant that she and her brothers were all fighting for the title. The boy said that he had the same situation. Belle and Sarah, the children of their stepmother, are bullied by their older siblings, and since their mother is dead, the only ones who can protect themselves are the children themselves. The girl listened to this story thoughtfully. The boy said that unfortunately he understood how Reich felt lonely, so if she needed something, she should not be shy about asking for it. The girl wasn't going to rely on anyone, especially this child. Belle asked her not to talk to him like a child because it was disrespectful. Mysterious figures in cloaks stood behind the tree trunks, hiding in the darkness. In the distance, a gate appeared, illuminated by the light night moonlight. As planned, Reich and his companions reached their destination in just one day. The girl got out of the carriage and complained that she was tired from the trip. A number of people emerged from the gate, led by a fair-haired youth who considered it necessary to greet Mrs. Reich Stagverine. The queen asked the boy who he was. He introduced himself as the leader of the night group in the Kingdom of Ash, named Peter Fred, and thanked the people who had arrived for coming to see them. Belle thought that the leader's name was familiar to him, and that he had heard it somewhere before. However, what could it mean that Peter Fred met them here? The leaves of the trees rustled among a bunch of other night sounds. The individuals in cloaks continued to hide behind the trees. One of the people took out a dagger that flashed in the darkness. The knights still stood in front of Reich and her companions who had accompanied her on her journey. Belle noticed that there were a lot of guards. Suddenly, a dagger was thrown towards them by a mysterious, unknown person in a cloak. Belle shifted his gaze, sensing the danger that abruptly interrupted his thoughts and reasoning. He blocked the dagger flying towards the girl by putting his divine scabbard forward, and it flew in the other direction without hitting its target. Reich was frightened by such an unexpected attack. Horror and surprise appeared on the queen's face. Her 2 guards were also stunned. There was a cry that they were under attack from enemies, and a bunch of daggers and other cutting and stabbing weapons flew towards the people. The boy was stunned by the large number of weapons. Peter Fred drew his sword from its sheath, calling his enemies villains and preparing to fight. He quickly repelled all these swords and daggers, standing in front of the queen and protecting her in this way. The guy had no intention of letting them even touch the girl, and he looked serious. Belle was surprised that the leader of the night group could parry so many swords. Could this really be a B-rank skill? The men in cloaks began to leave when they saw such resistance. Peter Fred ordered Meldia's knights to pursue the people, while he himself was going to hide the princess in the palace. Belle also remained with the knights, preparing to repel all attacks from the cloaked individuals. The girl looked back as she walked into the palace, accompanied by the leader of the knightly group. When they found themselves in one of the palace rooms, and the knight said that they were safe here because the palace's perimeter was protected by his colleagues. Reich said that she did not need to be protected, and she could handle it on her own. The knight said that this could not be done, even if it cost the knights their lives, but he was interrupted by a blow that severed his head. The corpse fell at the girl's feet, covering everything around with blood. Peter Fred smiled as he held his blades in his hands. The princess was frightened when she realized that she was in danger. The guy said yes, even if it cost the knights their lives. But the life of a knight seemed too cheap a sacrifice for Peter Fred. Reich panicked and asked who was in front of her and what he was doing. She realized that Peter Fred was the real killer. The girl took a frightened step back and fell awkwardly onto the floor in a sitting position. Reich looked up at the villain. She tried to summon her weapon, but her hand remained empty despite her attempts to summon it. Peter Fred's face twisted into a creepy, unkind smile as he said goodbye to the sweet princess, hinting at her future death at his hands. A panicked Reich silently prayed in her mind for someone to save her from this brutal killer. Suddenly, a human body thrown out flew into the window, smashing it into tiny pieces with its impact. The blonde killer turned at the sound of breaking glass. The body of the man in the cloak fell to the floor. Apparently, he was either dead or simply unconscious, but he showed no signs of life. Bell stood in the moonlit window opening, looking stern and ready for battle. And he looked around the room into which he had earlier thrown the glass-smashing enemy. The girl stared at him. There was some hope inside her, even though her guard had arrived unexpectedly. The boy informed Mrs. Reich of his arrival with a smile. But the smile quickly turned into a warlike look as he thanked the princess for waiting for his arrival. The girl was surprised that he was here, as she had already forgotten about his presence and despaired. Bell jumped down to the floor of the room, the heels of his boots hitting the floor as he landed. He confidently said that he would figure everything out himself from now on. Peter Fred said he thought the princess's security was far away. It was strange, but Bell managed to identify the fair-haired youth as the enemy, which impressed the killer, and he could not help but praise his younger opponent. The blue-haired boy replied that he simply remembered Peter Fred. The fair-haired boy asked with confusion and caution what Bell meant by memory, as these words seemed sudden and suspicious to him. The boy confidently said that his interlocutor's name was not actually Peter Fred. He remembered his real name, and it was Von Legal. The killer was taken by surprise by this truthful statement. Bell continued to share the information he knew. The fair-haired guy usually used 3 sets of lightning as a weapon. Von Legal's former targets include Count Slave and Count Bermott, and Count Reisenhardt, which sounded like a question from Bell. The killer asked how the boy knew this. Bell thought he had caught this blonde guy in his past life, but he didn't think that Von Legal had decided to kill the princess, and that hiding behind the head of the knights wouldn't work. The fair-haired boy was clearly unhappy that his identity was revealed so easily and quickly. He chuckled softly and mockingly. Von Legal stated that the boy barely knew him, and whether he really believed that he could defeat a killer of his rank. It was true. Killing a B-rank enemy would be a difficult task. But with Von Legal, it would have been a different matter. The killer became angry at this statement and released the blades from between his fingers, asking who Bell thought he was. The first attack, according to the boy, was knife-throwing. Von Legal threw 6 sharp daggers forward, spreading his arms out to the side after throwing. Bell managed to deftly dodge all the throws, and thus did not suffer from this attack of the enemy. The killer ran closer at this time, after which the guy delivered a slanting blow, but even so he was unable to cause damage to his young opponent. Von Legal was surprised and even stunned that he could not harm the blue-haired boy. He tried to attack Bell from behind, going behind him. But the blue-haired boy was prepared for this, because he recognized the attacks of the killer from his past life. A summoned sword appeared in his hand, with which he struck the enemy who had crept up from behind, claiming that he knew all the attacks, and even Von Legal's movements in advance. The fair-haired guy didn't understand how Bell managed to fight off his attacks and hit back. The boy claimed that he could kill the killer whenever he wanted, and suggested that he surrender if he still wanted to live. Von Legal sighed when he heard this proposal from his opponent. He shouted out in displeasure and even fury that he would destroy Bell. Bell smiled, because he knew one of the main shortcomings of this killer, because the blows of the blonde guy became weak due to anger, which made him more vulnerable. The boy deftly dodged the enraged Von Legal's subsequent series of attacks. The series of blows included a push, a cut, then a slanting blow, a throwing of a sharp dagger, blows from below, all of which Bell could easily predict due to his experience in his past life. Reich, who had been standing on the sidelines all this time and watching the battle unfold, was delighted that the boy, so small, was already dealing with the killer. Bell blocked the blonde boy's dagger strike with his large broadsword. The girl remembered with regret how she had complained about the presence of such a guard at the mission. The ring with the blue stone on her hand suddenly sparkled brightly. The two fighters wondered if this was the end. Bell swung his sword at the blonde boy. A bloody mark from this powerful blow appeared on the killer's chest, and he moved away from the boy on his knees. Bell knew all his moves. Von Legal couldn't hit the boy with his blows in the fight. Everything was as he had been told before. The killer remembered the words about the princess's guard from a noble family being an outstanding fighter, and the warnings to be careful. The blonde boy smiled nervously, deciding that it was time for his backup option. Bell wondered if his opponent was referring to the ability of a B-rank weapon, which was that Von Legal could create a stopping electrical barrier. The boy suggested that the enemy attack, because he claimed that he could withstand the enemy's strength. The blonde boy asked if this was true, holding a small bottle of blue glowing liquid in his hands. He grabbed the cork in the neck of the bottle with his fingers. Bell was taken by surprise when he saw the thing in the killer's hands. Von Legal said with a grin that it seemed the boy knew about such a thing as the tears of the Dragon King, after which he picked up the bottle and took a sip of this unusual liquid. The empty glass container fell to the floor with a loud thud. The young man clutched his own chest, his face showing an indescribable expression of incomprehensible emotions. Bell knew that the Dragon King's tears were a very rare item. If you drank this drink, your magic power would increase several times, which meant that if the killer used this technique, the situation would become bad. Von Legal held out his hand with the blades clasped between his fingers and said that the boy would regret not killing him immediately. He threw his weapon forward with a powerful swing of both hands. The blades flew forward rapidly. Bell shifted his blue eyes to the side. He deflected the dangerous blades with his sword in his hands, the deflected weapon sparkling, shrouded in small golden lightning. Von Legal smiled evilly, wanting to attack his opponent again, who was preventing him from killing the princess. He locked the boy in a magical thunder cage, which resembled a golden glowing diamond with a loud command. Due to the magnetic field, Bell's body could not move, which made him tense. Reich, still sitting on the floor, screamed his name in panic. The boy summoned his heavy, large green shield of Achilles, hoping that it could help him. He ordered the weapon that appeared to destroy everything around. The emerging wind was unable to penetrate anywhere beyond the magical barrier, which complicated the situation. Von Legal snapped his fingers with a malicious smile, ordering the thunder to rumble. Another blade, sparkling with lightning, flew towards the boy in the diamond-shaped barrier. The thunder cage sparkled powerfully, both from the outside and from the inside. Bell screamed in pain, unable to resist the golden lightning. The fair-haired boy laughed as he looked at this sight, asking the child not to worry and not to be afraid, because he was about to destroy the boy. Bell began to lose consciousness, and trying not to close his eyes, he thought that he couldn't die now. Several blue arrows flew forward with a loud whistle. These arrows shot down the flying blades, changing their flight path and preventing them from harming the boy imprisoned in the thunder cage. Some of the arrows shattered Bell's diamond-shaped barrier into pieces, freeing the child and shocking the blonde assassin. Von Legal cried out in shock, turning to look at the one who had fired the arrows. The princess stood in a fighting stance. In his hands was a bow for shooting, from which she released arrows that pierced the diamond-shaped golden barrier. Reich said that the knight had sacrificed his life, and in that case, she had nothing to fear. The blonde boy cursed at the girl, surprised that she was able to use her weapon and attack suddenly. He took out his blades and ran towards the princess, intending to attack her. A look of fear appeared on Rick's face. Bell thanked the lady for her help, already standing on the floor. Von Legal turned around in panic as he heard the voice of the freed boy. Bell swung his sword towards the blonde assassin, attacking him in this manner. Blood began to flow from Von Legal's mouth as the boy managed to hit his body with this blow and harm him. Drops of blood splashed onto Bell's impassive face. The blonde boy's body fell onto the wooden floor with a loud thud, the pool of blood growing under the corpse. The boy asked Reich with a smile if she was okay. The princess's face looked sad as she looked away. Reich stood up from the floor where she had fallen earlier. The girl touched Bell's cheek with regret, calling him a fool, because he himself was covered in a bunch of wounds. The princess asked the boy for forgiveness for dragging him into a dispute over the inheritance. Bell said that there was nothing terrible in this situation, and at the same time noted out loud that the girl really was as strong as she claimed. Reich said that she was not strong enough compared to the boy. The girl thanked Bell and promised that when her savior was in danger, she would definitely come and help him. The boy knelt down and formally thanked Mrs. Reich with a smile. The girl smiled kindly, looking at her guard in front of her. The princess took the ring off her finger, deciding to give it to her savior, also as a reward. She knelt down in front of Bell and placed the ring in his palm, telling him that she was giving it to him as a token of her respect. The boy stared at the ring in surprise as he recognized this unusual object. A white ring with golden patterns on its surface and a blue stone sparkled as it lay on his palm. The roofs of the ducal estate were illuminated by the bright afternoon sun. Galleon Catastrophe looked at his son, who knelt before his desk, and remarked out loud that his child had returned. The man heard all about the mission. Bell managed to successfully protect the queen. The boy confirmed this, looking up at his father and saying that he had indeed accomplished this important mission. Galleon Catastrophe suddenly noticed something with surprise. The Duke asked if the ring on the boy's hand was the Ring of Solomon. The child replied that he received the item as a token of gratitude from the queen. It was the Ring of Solomon, one of the treasures passed down from generation to generation by kings. Rumors said that it had special magical powers. The queen gave the boy such a valuable thing, which meant that he was not so simple. A smile appeared on the man's face as he thought about this. Galleon told his son that he would soon have to enroll in Athens. Belle was very upset when she heard these words. The Athena Holy Knights School is an institution attended by holy knights of recognized family lineage. In the Holocaust family, children are taught by ordinary home tutors. But the candidate for the title of head of the family must go to school and socialize. So Belle's path turned out to be the path to the title of head of the family, the Duke himself. The boy obediently agreed with his father, and Galleon Catastrophe himself said that when the time came to go to school, he would inform the child about it. But for now, let him rest. Belle turned to the Duke, his master. The man asked what he needed. The boy stood up from the carpet and straightened up, looking at his interlocutor. Belle had one more request for her father. The dark wooden doors creaked, revealing a bright passage into a new and illuminated room. Sarah ran around the warm, spacious, pink-decorated room with her arms outstretched and excited, while her brother watched with satisfaction. The girl, not believing her eyes, asked if this classroom really belonged to her now. She jumped face down onto the soft, fluffy, pale yellow bed. Belle answered his younger sister's question in the affirmative, saying that their father had given him permission. And since the Duke had settled them in the main mansion, they were no longer cramped. The girl thanked the boy, lying with a smile on the comfortable, soft bed. Suddenly, Sarah noticed her beloved brother's hand. There was a scratch on the back of Belle's hand, and his sister asked him what was wrong with his hand, if he was okay. The boy sheepishly replied that he had managed to get hurt on a mission when the girl grabbed his hand and began to examine it carefully. Sarah wished for pain in cats and dogs, and so that Belle's arm doesn't hurt. The boy thanked his sister politely and with a smile, claiming that now he really didn't feel any pain. Belle stroked the girl's head, noticing that she was being treated better in their family, which was partly what he had been trying to achieve. Now the boy had to think about what to do next. After all, in 5 years, another count will start a war against the ducal family of Catastrophe, and Sarah may again find herself in danger. In order to save his sister, there is still a lot to learn, which is what Belle will have to do. To do this, the boy needs to become the next head of their family. Laser opened the doors to his master's room, who was painting something on his easel with an enthusiastic look. The room of the eldest son of the Catastrophe family was dark and decorated in purple colors. The blonde servant knelt down, bowing to Jin Catastrophe. The gentleman did not answer immediately, too focused on drawing. A yellow spot blossomed in the midst of the blue of his canvas. Laser said that to his regret he had one message. The Duke and head of the family decided to give Mr. Bell to Athena. This is the first time that other than the eldest son of the Catastrophe family, someone will be sent to this school. A war for the title may break out. Before that can start, the servant had a certain proposal. The dark-haired boy told Laser to shut up and leave him alone. His hand laid the palette and brush aside. Jin Catastrophe believed that his younger brother did not pose a significant threat to him at the moment. Also, the fact that Belle was getting better was beneficial for the guy. The paint ran down the canvas. Jin touched the canvas with his fingers, the liquid purple paint. Laser watched his master's actions with surprise and bewilderment. The dark-haired boy slapped his paint-stained palm across his face. Jin Catastrophe said, removing his hand from his face, which was stained purple, that he liked to break things that were already finished. The fair-haired servant sheepishly agreed with his master's statement. Sometime after this conversation, Laser was walking along the corridors of the estate, thinking that no matter how much Mr. Jin wished, it was dangerous to leave Belle. The boy has several weapons and at his young age defeated a B-rank knight. Just in case the blonde servant needs to do something about this. Belle sat in a spacious, bright room. Now the most important thing for him was the skills of weapons of rank B and above. If the boy can unlock them, he will have a great advantage. But to do this, he needs to defeat many high-ranking monsters, and Belle doesn't have that much time. In the blade of his weapon, the child noticed a silhouette approaching him. Bell turned around, trying to recognize the person walking towards him. It was Laser who entered the room. The fair-haired guy turned to the boy with a serious expression on his face. Bell was surprised that Laser came and addressed him. The boy asked if his older brother, Jin Catastrophe, had asked him for anything. The blonde servant asked for forgiveness for what happened earlier, bowing to Bell. The boy claimed that it was impolite of him to draw his sword on the Duke's son. The boy wondered what had happened to Laser that he had become so polite. But he said that there was nothing terrible in his interlocutor's actions, and he was ready to forgive him. The fair-haired servant thanked Bell from the bottom of his heart. He also had another topic of conversation with the child, which he told his interlocutor about. Bell's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. Laser asked if the boy could go with him on a monster-slaying mission. Bell asked his interlocutor again with surprise. Laser explained that the other knights, including Lord Jin Catastrophe, had other plans. But seeing Bell's impressive results, the servant decided to ask for their help. The boy found it strange that Jin's servant was asking him for help. As the son of a duke, he could not refuse the mission, but he had to keep an eye on everything and be careful. The child agreed to accept this request for help. Laser thanked Mr. Bell, but on the blonde boy's face was a creepy smile of anticipation. He had some kind of plan for this mission, connected with the boy. Bell asked impatiently where the specified mission was to be carried out. Laser put on a concentrated expression again and replied that the mission location was in the remote area of Meldia Ethica. The name Ethics was familiar to Bell. The boy was happy, because in order to increase his strength, he needed to go to Ethics. Ambrosia was an incredible and quite rare item that, when consumed, would permanently increase the amount of mana. Two bay horses pulled a dark carriage forward along the road. Bell sat next to his older brother's servant, thinking that if he could get a few, he could reach B rank without having to hunt a ton of monsters. However, there is only one incredibly rare chance to get such a valuable item as Ambrosia. This chance and method was to conquer the hidden dungeon. Bell thought about one such hidden dungeon as he looked out the window of the carriage he was inside. One such hidden dungeon appeared not far from this city, Ethica. People walked in small numbers along the night and dark streets of the city. Laser and the blue-haired boy were sitting in some drinking establishment. The servant suggested that they discuss everything one last time before this important mission, before they went there. Their task this time was to defeat Leviathan. Laser reported that it had been confirmed that there were 7 of these C-rank monsters in total, and the pair needed to deal with them as soon as possible. It was already late today. The fair-haired servant suggested starting tomorrow. First, they needed to rest from the road. Bell agreed with this option, and getting up from the table said that he would go to his room to rest. The boy left, and as he walked up the stairs, Laser snorted, watching him go. The fair-haired guy thought with a grin that Bell was a real fool, because he didn't even realize how little time he had left to live in this world. Laser was going to make it look like it was just an accident tomorrow. The boy didn't care how talented Bell was, he was just a C-rank fool right now. So the servant thought that it would be easy to deal with him. The hotel window glowed in the darkness of the night, standing out from the surroundings like a yellow square. The boy opened the window, thinking that enough time had passed for Laser to have already fallen asleep. Bell summoned his green divine shield of Achilles, which immediately appeared in his hands. The boy made the shield float in front of his window using the magical powers of the wind. The child stood on his flying weapon as if it were a flying platform. The shield carried Bell forward. The hidden dungeon with Ambrosia was located deep in the monster forest, where people did not go. The boy and his master found this dungeon long ago, and no one else should know about the existence of this place. He rushed forward quickly through the air towards his goal. Bell jumped to the ground, his boots hitting the forest floor. The boy stood with one foot on the ground and the other on his smoking shield, looking ahead with a stern expression. In front of him was a small opening, most likely serving as an entrance to a cave. Bell walked into the stone opening, holding onto the wall with his hand on one side. In the distance, the child saw a long, narrow passage glowing green with a symbol that looked like an eye drawn on top. Bell smiled triumphantly, because this was exactly what he was looking for. Hidden dungeons were divided into ranks, which could be distinguished by colors. For example, blue dungeons belonged to rank A. Green color indicated B-rank dungeons. And after clearing a dungeon, a person would receive ambrosia of the appropriate rank for a particular dungeon. And from him, the boy could only expect an increase in mana. However, to clear the dungeon, Bell will need to deal with the boss. When the boy and his teacher found this dungeon in his past life, the child was a D-rank warrior, and the teacher stopped him, claiming that it was too early. Of course, it will still be difficult for the current Bell to deal with a B-rank boss, but the boy could not retreat from his fear. Bell extended his palm towards the green entrance to the dungeon. The boy walked inside, thinking that he needed to become stronger as quickly as possible to change the future of his younger beloved sister Sarah. After some time, the child was fighting with some creature in the stone corridor of the green dungeon. Bell clashed his sword blade with his opponent's blade, blocking the enemy's strike. The enemy was a creature in human knight armor, and with a blue fire in place of its head. The enemy swung his blade and ran towards the boy. His swing crossed the space with a blue flash. Bell managed to successfully block his opponent's blow. The boy swung his blade after fending off the armored creature's attack. Bell jumped at the enemy, splitting the monster's fiery blue head into two halves with his blow. The creature's head disappeared as he pushed the boy forward. Bell snorted in displeasure while in the air. A blue light shone in his palm, illuminating everything around him. The boy summoned his massive divine hammer Mjolnir, which glowed golden in his hands as he swung his weapon that appeared. The child struck his opponent with the hammer with all his might. The fire in the armor continued to stand in its place, holding its shield and sword in its hands. Bell realized that his physical attacks did not leave even a scratch on this armor. He thought about his next steps in this battle. Bell swung his glowing blade, standing in a fighting stance. The boy believed that now was the time for him to use magic. The child attacked the fire in the armor with a giant swing that looked like a white flash. Bell thought with glee that magical attacks were harder for his opponent to block. The boy had never seen such a monster before, but he assumed that this creature was at least C rank. The armored enemy swung and attempted to hit Bell, but he managed to block the attack with a loud cry, even though he was caught off guard by the enemy's sudden attack. The boy was confused, not understanding what to do in such a situation. He took note of the monster's shield. If a creature in armor had a shield, it meant that there were attacks that it had to defend against. Bell stared at his enemy in front of him. The mana-charged fire bullet should definitely work in the boy's opinion. So the child summoned his divine magic gun, Ragnarok. A fireball shot out of the barrel of his gun. The Fire Knight ran towards the child, swinging his sword. Bell kept his wary gaze on his opponent. The monster's head was glowing with blue fire. The creature swung its blade with all its might, intending to kill the man in front of it. With the enemy very close, Bell decided that the moment was perfect to attack with his pistol and fired again. A fiery projectile flew out of Ragnarok's muzzle. This fiery attack created a hole in the chest of the approaching monster. The creature fell to its knees in front of the wary boy, who still had his fingers on the trigger. After this, the creature with blue fire instead of a head fell backwards onto the stone floor of the room, knocked down by the force of the fiery magic projectile. Bell also fell to the floor, looking at his opponent. The boy wiped his forehead with his hand, breathing out in relief after the battle, still holding the magic pistol in his palm. Bell thought that a magical attack could melt this creature. If the boy didn't have a fire element weapon, he would definitely have problems. The average monster was already quite difficult, which meant that the boss would not be a simple creature either. This is to be expected from a specific dungeon, but the boy was grateful for the opportunity to obtain such rare items from the clutches of monsters, such as the one in front of him. The mythical drink that restored both stamina and mana. Bell took a sip of the magic drink, and with that, he was able to continue exploring this dungeon. The boy cut one enemy into pieces with a blade. Another enemy fell under the blow of a magic hammer. Bell walked forward confidently, exploring the dungeon further. In front of him was a very tall, narrow door glowing green, which he was heading towards. The boy wondered in anticipation who was waiting for him behind this door. It could be a snake or some kind of demon. The child touched the green hard surface with his hand. Bell walked into the large room behind the doors, wanting to see the boss he was about to fight. The room turned out to be a real arena, which surprised the boy who was looking at this place. The child narrowed his eyes, expecting some dangerous enemy. In the distance, Bell saw a dark, human-like silhouette that was illuminated by a red, gloomy light. It was the first time the boy had felt goosebumps and his mouth was dry since his rebirth. The enemy radiated a heart-rending pressure. It was a dark, armored creature with horns and spikes, and a worthy weapon, a long and broad sword. The monster's eyes glowed red. The creature confidently headed towards Bell without hesitation. The boy happily realized that this was the boss of this place. The monster was already next to the man. Bell reached for his divine scabbard, which, as usual, was always with him, hanging on his belt. The dark-horned creature looked down at the child in front of it, not yet looking to attack. The creature raised its wide blade up. Bell panicked as he realized that it seemed like the boss was about to attack. The monster came even closer and swung its sword at the child, wanting to strike. The boy managed to jump back from the sharp and quick attack, remaining unharmed. The dungeon boss struck again. missing Bell but shattering the stone floor of the battle arena. The boy realized in horror that if the monster hit him with a sword, the child would die from one such blow. The creature paused for a moment, analyzing the situation and its future actions. The monster turned its head, staring at Bell with its red eye. The beast swung its blade at Bell from below, causing the child to jump upward as a way to dodge and avoid getting hurt. The boy, still in the air, summoned Caliburn. A magical divine blade immediately appeared in Bell's hands. The boy swung his sword hard, dealing a powerful blow to the dungeon boss's back. The monster's red eye flashed. The child cursed, because this was another heavily armored monster that would take a lot of time and effort to deal with. The blade of the creature's sword emitted dark energy as it swung the weapon towards Bell again. In the boy's hand was the hilt of his sword, Caliburn, but then the Ragnarok pistol appeared in his palm, replacing the weapon with a blade. Bell decided to try to deal with him in the same way as with the previous opponents from this dungeon. The child began shooting at the monster, mentally counting the shots fired from his firearm. A slight look of horror and confusion appeared on Bell's face. The boy shot at the monster again and again. Another fiery projectile flew out of the barrel of the divine magic pistol. Bell focused on his next attack. The boy fired again, wishing at his strong and powerful opponent. The projectile hit the creature in the chest and exploded in a giant orange, circular burst of fire. The dungeon boss staggered, staring at the ceiling as Bell watched his enemy expectantly. The monster turned back to the boy. He was unharmed by the child's attack and his chest was glowing with a green light. Bell was shocked because this monster turned out to be immune to magical attacks. The dungeon boss ran towards the boy and swung his sword towards the man. The creature stood with the blade pointed forward. Bell loudly summoned his magical Achilles. A huge green shield appeared in the boy's hands, saving him from the sword attack of a giant dark-armored creature. The creature's blow forced the man to move away from it some distance, but even though the attack was very strong, the shield was able to withstand it. Bell hid behind the shield, looking out from there with caution at the monster. The enemy crouched in front of the child, which made him wary. After this, the monster, in one huge leap, rushed upward towards the ceiling. The creature swung its blade through the air, intending to attack the boy from above. Bell looked at his opponent warily. The dungeon boss struck again, destroying everything around. The monster stopped, landing on the ground and sending up clouds of dust around it. The boy jumped back some distance from the enemy, not wanting to find himself in a dangerous situation. Landing deftly on the stone floor, the child realized that he did not have enough mana to penetrate this enemy armor, and now he was wondering what to do next. The boy looked into the cloud of dust that rose up after the monster and the man landed. In this impenetrable dust, something sparkled like a bright star. A bead of sweat ran down Bell's nervous face as he tried to spot the enemy. Amidst the impenetrable clouds of dust, a visible sword blade appeared, aiming towards the boy. The child gasped in shock, barely managing to put his shield forward and protect himself. The deflected blade flew to the side and sank into the stone floor. Bell sighed, waiting for the enemy to attack again. The dungeon boss appeared behind him, wanting to strike the kid in the head from behind and thus catch him off guard. And Bell realized with surprise and shock that the sword was just a decoy. The monster delivered a powerful blow with his fists. The boy gasped in pain as he felt a powerful blow land on his head. The child fell face down on the stone floor, dropping his weapons, the shield Achilles and the blade Caliburn, from his hands. The dungeon boss raised his leg above his body, as if intending to crush the fallen man in front of him. The creature confidently kicked the spot where Bell was, but under the monster's foot there was only an empty space, while the boy himself was at a distance from the enemy, still holding in his hand the green shield with the powers of the wind. The empty bottle lay fallen on the floor. Bell was grateful to the gods that he had this mythical drink, but unfortunately it was the last bottle. The dungeon boss grabbed the blade of a large blade that had fallen to the floor some time ago. In that case, the boy will have to take a risk in a fight with this enemy. Achilles was one of the heaviest of all his divine weapons. The child swung his shield, pulling it back behind his back. Bell thought that if he pushed the enemy with his wind attribute, he didn't want the monster to think that the shield was only for defense. The boy threw the magical wind shield like a projectile at the enemy. This shield could become a powerful long-range weapon with such a powerful throw forward towards the enemy. The shield flew past the tall, dark opponent as he managed to get his bearings and dodge the divine weapon's attack. Bell gasped in shock, not expecting such an action from the enemy. The monster ran towards the boy, pointing its sword blade forward at the man. The monster waved its weapon at the child. Bell realized that he might not have time to dodge. The child no longer had a shield, since he had thrown away this important weapon earlier. Bell gave the shield the order to destroy the monster. The shield struck the dungeon boss in the chest, pushing him back with powerful force. The boy was glad that his plan worked perfectly. The child ran forward towards the enemy and jumped, spreading his arms out to the sides, after which Bell extended his palm forward, in which a weapon began to appear, shining with a blue light. As a giant hammer appeared in his hands, the boy swung the divine weapon, leaping forward at the monster. The dungeon boss looked at Bell. The child delivered a powerful, glittering blow to the creature's head while still in the air. The monster's head hit the ground with a thud as it fell to the stone floor of the fighting arena after the blow. Bell sighed heavily, looking at his opponent. The boy understood that using the shield as a boomerang was dangerous, but it was worth it. This blow did at least half the job. The child believed that all that was left now was to pierce what was inside this dark, heavy armor. The dungeon boss stood on one knee in front of the man, after which the creature got up from the floor and looked towards Bell. The boy was surprised that the monster was still not defeated, and the end of their battle had not yet come. The armor fell in scattered pieces onto the stone surface with a loud roar. The creature was shedding its own armor to reveal its thin, dark, inhuman body with green patterns, which surprised Bell and made him question why and for what purpose the monster was doing this. The dungeon boss gripped his blade tighter by the hilt. The creature pulled a strange long piece out of the sword's hilt. After that, the monster pulled out a sharp blade from its dark sheath. The dungeon boss threw the dark scabbard on the floor as unnecessary. Bell watched the spectacle unfolding before him in shock and confusion. The monster ran towards the man, swinging its sword at Bell. The boy realized that his enemy was quite fast, which was not the case before when the monster had not yet taken off his heavy armor. The child blocked the enemy's attack. The creature's impact sent Bell flying a long distance and hitting the wall of the room with a loud bang. The boy screamed loudly in pain. The child fell down, face down on the stone floor, and his collision with the wall left a giant, deep hole that split into a bunch of cracks on the sides. The monster took a step forward. Bell groaned, lifting his head off the floor and looking at something in front of him. The dungeon boss approached him, dragging his giant sword across the stone floor. The boy was still standing on his hands and knees on the floor as the monster walked towards him. A tall, thin creature was already standing in front of Bell, looking down at him. The blue hair that fell over his face hid the face of the silent child. The dungeon boss swung his blade and raised his leg to strike, but the movement of his blade was stopped by something dark, hard and durable, emitting purple light. Bell, who had stopped the weapon strike with the magical divine glove that had appeared, looked up at the creature and sternly told it not to tempt fate. The creature silently looked at the child with red eyes, not expressing any visible or understandable emotions. Still holding the magic glove, Bell summoned his divine blade Caliburn, which immediately appeared in his clenched palm. The boy returned to an upright position and immediately attacked the dungeon boss with his blade, clashing with the enemy's blade. The child's eyes changed color from blue to red as he said that the real fight was about to begin. The boy rushed forward again, slashing his blade at his enemy's weapon. The enemy swung his sword, wanting to cut Bell in two, but the man managed to duck and the blade flew past. The two fighters rushed around the room from side to side, trying to inflict a large amount of damage on each other. Because the dungeon boss removed his armor, he became lighter and his speed went to an extreme level. But this creature is not much faster than the current Bell. And realizing this, the boy ran towards his opponent. The child decided that now would be the end for the dungeon boss in front of him. Suddenly, the patterns and stripes on the monster's body changed color. They became red, but before they were turquoise. The creature quickly dodged Bell's strike, moving to the side of the blade's trajectory. The boy was stunned by such a sharp reaction. The monster pointed its blade at him, but the child managed to block it with his own weapon. Bell noticed the red light that appeared, and that his opponent became noticeably faster after these changes. The boy became tense, sensing the increased strength and capabilities of his enemy. Another blow from the dungeon boss tore the clothes off one of Bell's arms as he tried to block the attack. The child's eyes turned red again, as he thought that this wasn't going to end there. The monster still hadn't defeated the man, but Bell needed more power. The boy needed more power and strength. He felt the energy in the glove that hugged his hand. The child's eyes narrowed as he continued to think about the power he needed so much, feeling the changes around him. A dark entity in a long hooded cloak and one large purple eye where his face should have been, who agreed to Bell's requests. A purple clawed hand reached forward. The entity was willing to accept the deal and grant the boy the power he needed, albeit in exchange for his soul. The baby's iris took on a purple hue, mixing with his natural blue color. Bell screamed as he felt some changes in his body as everything around him turned purple. The boy realized that he couldn't concentrate. He felt like he was disappearing as he rushed forward at full speed, swinging his sword. The voice of the entity in the child's head asked again, "Does he still need strength?" The voice claimed that Bell was weak, and because of this weakness he was always bullied. Because of the same weakness, the boy was killed in his past life by an unknown person. The entity believed that the child should have already had enough of his weakness, and it was his turn to become someone who achieves everything by force. The boy listened to these speeches, still not controlling himself. Bell spread his arms out to the sides, stared at the ceiling of the high dungeon room, and screamed loudly, looking up. The creature was already running quickly towards the man, bending down as it ran. The boy, whose pupils had disappeared, causing his eyes to turn completely white, ran forward towards his enemy. The child again tried to strike his opponent, but he did not leave him alone. Bell charged at the dungeon boss over and over again, too overwhelmed by the power unknown to him, and thinking only about destroying his opponent. This thought repeated itself over and over in the boy's head. The child swung his sword again and ran towards the monster, a smile full of rage on his face. Bell was overwhelmed by thoughts of how much he wanted to kill everything that came his way. But a painfully familiar face appeared in his memories. It was the face of his happy younger sister Sarah, who was smiling brightly. The boy's eyes became aware again as he thought about Sir, and his thoughts became more collected. The child blocked another dangerous blow from the dungeon boss. Their blades crossed as the two fighters prevented each other from attacking. Another memory flashed through Bell's mind. He again saw the happy and innocent face of his younger and beloved sister. The boy said that he was not fighting for the sake of killing. Bell fought to protect his dear sister from all dangers. The monster swung its blade at the child again. The boy roughly ordered the dark one-eyed entity to shut up and give it his power. Bell covered half of his face with the broad blade of his sword and loudly called upon Aegis. The child pushed the monster far away from him with a powerful blow of the weapon. The dark entity said that it was on the boy's side, and he just had to say so, and the entity would grant Bell power. But he will give the boy this power only in exchange for his soul. The child stood in front of his opponent, radiating purple energy. Bell ran forward towards his enemy at full speed. The creature also did not lag behind and ran towards the man. They clashed again, the blue-haired boy and the thin, dark monster. The labyrinth boss and Bell tried to hit each other, but so far they were unable to do so because their strength was almost equal. The monster once again swung its blade at the child, but the man managed to duck in time, thus saving himself from a sword blow to the head. Bell concluded that his opponent was slow. The boy struck again, and with this blow he managed to cut off the creature's arm, which flew off some distance away. The dungeon boss's face was still emotionless, looking blank, and his eyes were still glowing red. Bell swung the divine blade again for another attack. The child struck the monster directly, trying to cut it into two equal halves. Parts of the monster's face began to move apart. Bell looked ahead at the body of the dungeon boss in front of him. The two severed halves of the creature fell with a sound onto the stone floor of the battle arena, dropping the sword from its hands with a crash. A dark, gloomy energy emanated from the face of the defeated monster. Bell crouched down in front of the monster's corpse, realizing that he seemed to be done with this battle. The purple glove in the boy's hand began to glow with a bright light. The glove was gone, and the child himself was thinking, the dungeon boss was a strong enemy. He was dangerously close to losing himself. Now Bell needs to ignore the use of Aegis as much as possible. The boy rose from the floor, also taking a small green bottle from it. Thus the child managed to get hold of the valuable ambrosia. If Bell drinks it, his mana should reach B rank, and thanks to this, he will be able to open the first level of his own unique skill. The boy had never seen such a thing as ambrosia before, and so he wondered if it was normal for a child to just drink this liquid in a small bottle. Bell decided it was worth drinking for the future and threw his head back, swallowing the ambrosia, after which the boy breathed a sigh of relief. The child stared at his hands in surprise. He felt his mana improve. It seemed incredible to Bell, namely the possibility of reaching B rank in an instant. Suddenly the boy felt something unusual, opening his eyes even wider. The child groaned, clutching his chest sharply. Bell fell to his knees, not understanding what was happening to him, and with a feeling in his chest, it felt like his whole body was burning. The divine scabbard hanging on the boy's waist began to glow with a bright blue light. The child did not understand what was happening to him. The boy fell face down on the stone floor, and his scabbard continued to glow with an unusual light. Under the child's body were blue pentagrams, also emitting light. Bell opened his eyes with difficulty, coming to consciousness. The boy sat up and began to look around him, as the surrounding space had clearly changed. The child wondered where he was, as this was clearly not the same battle arena from the dungeon he was originally in. It was a gigantic space, in blue colors, and the boy himself stood on a platform with a giant blue pentagram. A figure suddenly approached from behind and remarked out loud that Bell had woken up, which caught him off guard. The person in the white cloak and holding a green shield in his hand said that they had not seen the boy for a long time. The hood of the cloak hid the man's face in the darkness under the white fabric. The child was surprised to recognize his teacher in this person. On one of the square columns sat a guy with red hair, holding a red pistol in his hand, which was Ragnarok. On another angular column, resembling a throne, sat a girl with long pink hair, armed with a hammer. On the next such elevation sat a guy in a compressed and uncertain pose, on whose hand was a purple Aegis glove. On the fourth chair was a fair-haired man with a magical blade called Caliburn lying on his lap. Teacher Bella, wearing a white cloak, began to say words of greeting. The boy looked at this place and these people in surprise, not understanding what was going on. The man in the cloak was happy to welcome the child to the realm of souls, which is what this place was. The teacher removed his hood from his head, revealing his middle-aged appearance. He had gray hair, a beard, green eyes, one of which was covered by a black bandage. The man said that the reunion with the student was quite touching. Bell said enthusiastically that he was glad to see his teacher. His teacher was Regius, and it was he who gave the child Avalon. It was this man who was the true owner of the magical green windshield of Achilles, one of the divine weapons in the divine scabbard. Bell walked up to the man, holding out his hand and smiling, saying he was glad to see him. But the boy didn't understand why Regius remembered him, because he had returned in time, and that meant that they couldn't meet yet. The teacher replied that it was natural. He had always watched the child from the soul realm, and had seen everything, both Bell's death and his reincarnation. The boy was surprised by the statement he heard. Regius explained that this space was located inside Avalon, and the 5 divine weapons were kept here. The weapons are kept together with the souls of each of their successors. Bell was even more surprised when he heard about some successors and their souls being here. The boy asked where his teacher's body was in that case. The man assumed that the real him probably still lives deep in the mountains and goes about his usual daily life, such as chopping wood with an axe. Avalon is a divine weapon that is tightly connected to the soul of its owner. When the child returned Avalon to the past with his connection, the present Regius lost that connection. Moreover, the man's consciousness is now connected with his consciousness in this world. The boy understood this explanation, but he had another question. Was his return in time related to Avalon, his divine scabbard? The teacher didn't know this, but he thought that Avalon didn't have the power to go back in time, and the child agreed with this, accepting this option. Bell had never thought before that even his teacher would not know what happened to his student, and he was worried about what had happened at all. The man patted the child on the head, claiming that he was doing a good job anyway to protect his little sister, Sarah. Regius praised the boy, saying that it was a good job, continuing to stroke his hair. Bell became embarrassed and blushed, breaking away from the teacher's palm and asking him to stop with the praise. What was more important to the boy? Could Regius explain to him how the child ended up in this unusual magical space? The man said that Bell would see it for himself. Someone landing on the hard stone floor with glowing pentagrams interrupted their conversation. The red-haired guy cheerfully asked how long the couple would chat about life, because he also wanted to join them, and not sit forever on the angular column. This guy was the second heir of Avalon named Raven, and he was also the owner of the divine pistol Ragnarok. The man wanted to say something negative to the guy, but he interrupted him, putting his arm around his shoulders and interrupting him, starting to talk about something of his own. Raven began to touch the teacher's cheeks and suggested that he relax, asking if the old man was a golem. But the man was clearly unhappy with such stupid behavior and impolite attitude towards himself. Bell watched this scene with incomprehension, not saying a word, and analyzing the behavior of a person new to him. The boy addressed the boy, the 6th heir of the divine scabbard of Avalon, in a cheerful and friendly tone and introduced himself, extending his palm for a handshake. The child looked at Raven in surprise. Bell wanted to return the handshake, but the red-haired guy quickly removed his hand. Whoop! Raven made a funny sound, raising his hand up and not allowing the child to shake it, as this was Raven's joke. The boy stared at the guy in bewilderment and incomprehension. Raven grabbed his stomach and burst out laughing, finding the child's reaction very funny, while the boy himself still did not understand the behavior and jokes of his interlocutor. Raven continued to laugh because this boy, who became the 6th heir to the divine scabbard of Avalon, seemed very cute and naive to him. "Shut up already!" His laughter was abruptly cut off by a girl who approached them. Her name is Charlotte, and she is the 3rd heir to Avalon. Raven put his arm around the embarrassed Belle's shoulders and tried to justify himself by saying that it was just a little greeting joke. Seeking support, he turned to the fourth heir, named Horo, who sat on one of the stone thrones. But this guy clearly wasn't going to support Raven's joke, and generally looked rather withdrawn, secretive, and even a little sad. Charlotte continued to scold Raven for these jokes, claiming that he just liked to make fun of people. "No need to be so angry, you'll ruin all your beauty, baby," the heir exclaimed with a chuckle in response to all her indignation. This nickname drove the girl into a state of mad rage in a second. A fight would have been inevitable if Ragius had not intervened in time. Charlotte immediately asked indignantly whose side he was on. But he was prevented from answering by the laughing Raven again, who covered the man's mouth with his hand and answered instead that Ragius was definitely on his side. Belle watched this altercation with great surprise, seeing his teacher so embarrassed and even somewhat submissive for the first time. But in the end, he came to the conclusion that all this only proved how great and powerful these heirs of Avalon were. He remembers his teacher telling him stories about them. The heirs of Avalon are great heroes who fought evil in the past and defeated it. Guys, can't you come to some kind of agreement already? Suddenly, another voice was heard. It was the first heir of Avalon, named Adam. He instantly stopped all the arguing and told Belle that there was a reason why he was summoned to the Soul Realm. He was moved here to give the necessary instructions. Adam sternly said that it was too early for Belle to unlock the divine weapon's abilities. The boy looked at his heir in bewilderment, not understanding the reasons for such a ban. It turns out that the problem is that divine weapons with their unique ability unlocked emit an incredible amount of mana. And if Belle unlocked it right now, his young and immature body would most likely not be able to accept such an amount of mana, and the boy would simply break under the constant pressure. Now Belle understands what that pain was that he felt before being transferred to the realm of souls. Adam believes that the boy needs to wait until he grows up before unlocking the divine weapon. But Belle can't agree with him, and resolutely clenches her fists, making a difficult decision. He tells Adam that he can't stop. He needs this power to protect his younger sister, Sarah. Adam stands up to his full height on his stone throne, his figure towering menacingly over everyone. He doesn't argue with the boy and simply steps forward, saying that if that happens, he'll have to kill Belle right now. Immediately, he breaks away from the throne and flies down at great speed towards the boy. Belle instantly tenses and clenches her teeth, frantically thinking about what to do. This guy is too fast, we need to come up with something to protect ourselves from him. The boy realizes that Adam is already standing behind him and there is no time left. At the last second, he moves his hand with the sword behind his back, managing to deflect the enemy's blow. Adam is a little confused. He didn't expect such an immediate reaction. He thought he could clearly demonstrate the immaturity of this boy, and he could not even imagine that he would be able to repel the attack. He bows his head thoughtfully and draws his weapon back. Now he understands that constant battles have hardened this boy and helped him grow in many ways. So Adam changes his mind after all. He hands the boy a sword, instructing him to use it first. A satisfied smile appears on the faces of the teacher and the other heirs. Belle can't believe that they all accept him. Adam believes that if the boy uses only one ability, his body will be able to withstand it and everything will be fine. So he allows Belle to unlock B-rank Caliburn, and when the time comes, the heirs will unlock everything else, including A-rank. Belle can only dream of A-rank ability, but now he has something to strive for. So he looks up at his new friends and vows to try his best. Adam smiles back at him good-naturedly. Raven walks up to the boy and ruffles his hair, wishing him luck in his usual manner. Charlotte laughs and asks Belle to take good care of his little sister, and only Horo remains to sit silently on his stone throne, hugging himself and sadly looking straight ahead. Adam promises that they will continue to watch Belle from the shadows. Now the boy can return back calmly. Before he can understand anything, he finds himself sitting on the floor of the dungeon again. His body no longer hurts, and that strange feeling is gone too. He looks at Caliburn with a happy smile, proudly holding it out in front of him. Tomorrow, on a mission, he will use his unique ability. The next day comes, and it promises to be difficult. Together with Laser, Belle sails forward on a small ship. Jin's servant says that very soon they will arrive at the Leviathan's habitat. Belle replies that he understands him and begins his preparations. Laser smirks at him, waiting impatiently for his plan to get rid of this boy to finally come to fruition. A man in a cloak stands silently nearby, holding an oar tightly in his hands and steering the ship in the right direction. His face is covered by a thick mask, and his gaze is directed straight down at the deck. Belle, however, is in a state of deep thought. He still doesn't understand why Laser invited him to hunt the Leviathan, which is a C-rank monster, when the man could easily deal with it himself. If he does have something evil in mind, it will be very difficult to deal with such a strong opponent. Belle decides that she won't take her eyes off him if possible. Meanwhile, they reach the place where they assume the Leviathan should be. Bell leans over to look over the side, but everything is quiet and calm. Turning around, he sees Laser approaching with a drawn dagger in his hand. The boy immediately realizes that he has big problems. Laser grins unkindly, seeing the tension on Bell's face. Despite the boy's suspicions, he brings the dagger to his own wrist and makes a small cut. The man explains to Bell that they need to throw out bait to make the monster show itself. The smell of blood drives Leviathans into a frenzy, so you need to be prepared. And he turns out to be right, because under the water, the silhouette of a monster rapidly swimming towards them can already be easily seen. To everyone's surprise, the Leviathan is not alone. Several pairs of bright red eyes are glowing in the water. Laser says there are many more of them than he expected. Bell replies that it's not a problem since they're still just C-rank monsters. The boy suggests splitting up, but Laser refuses, explaining that he cannot allow him to fight alone. "Why not?" Bell asks sullenly. "Because you will die here." He hears the expected answer from Laser. Immediately after his words, Bell notices an ice whip flying rapidly straight towards him. He doesn't have time to dodge, and the whip wraps tightly around his ankle. The boy, not understanding anything, turns around and sees the same man with the oar. "How naive you are," he laughs loudly. He pulls down his hood and the boy realizes that it was Spencer Gray all along. The guy smiles contentedly, although his smile now looks more like a malicious grin. Bell lets out a disappointed cry, not understanding how he hadn't noticed earlier who exactly was hiding behind the mask and hood. "Spencer, come on!" Suddenly, Laser screams and events begin to unfold rapidly. The purple-haired paladin carries out Laser's command. He pulls and points his whip upward, causing Bell to hang upside down. The boy's leg is already starting to be covered in a crust of ice, and he understands that things are very bad. Spencer swings his whip again and throws Bell straight overboard to be torn apart by the Leviathans. However, even this seems not enough to him. With a malicious laugh, he strikes the surface of the water with his whip. Now everything around is covered with an icy crust, and the paladin is sure that this will prevent Bell from swimming to the surface, which means the boy is doomed to die. Bell dives into the very depths of the water, while the Leviathans circle around him impatiently, anticipating their prey. The heavy chunk of ice around his ankle pulls the boy even deeper down. Laser leans against the side of the ship to see for himself that his enemy has gone down. Having seen this with his own eyes, he and Spencer step onto the ice to now deal with the monsters circling around. Upon returning, they will sadly inform the Duke that Bell has died in the line of duty. Bell, having sunk to the very bottom, takes out the Achilles shield. This item doesn't just control the wind, it creates it. Or more precisely, it initially appears immediately with a layer of air. And now this property of his turns out to be very useful. It is only thanks to this shield that Bell can breathe. Now able to breathe freely, Bell reflects on how he had not expected Laser to team up with Spencer and was therefore unprepared to repel their combined attack. Looking up, he sadly thinks that the two of them have frozen too much of the water's surface. But, to their misfortune, they don't even realize that Bell managed to survive. The first thing the boy needs to do now is free his leg from the piece of ice that is restricting his movement. So he raises Achilles' shield above his head and brings it down with all his might on the interfering ice. From the very first blow, the ice gives in and shatters into many small fragments, freeing the already numb limb. Now the boy can move, but a new problem appears in the form of a small cut on his freed leg, from which droplets of blood are already oozing directly into the water. Bell thinks he probably cut himself when Spencer grabbed his leg. Not a minute passes before at least a dozen Leviathans fly in at the smell of blood. "Caliburn!" the boy shouts to himself, summoning the sword. He is now in a total minority, and at first glance it seems that his chances are slim, but this is a good opportunity to try out the new things he acquired in the realm of souls. Bell is even a little glad that everything turned out this way, because now, for the first time since his rebirth, he will be able to use a unique skill. So, with a slight anticipation, the boy decisively proceeds to unlock the skill. And just in time, because one of the Leviathans is already rushing towards him at breakneck speed, its mouth wide open and dozens of sharp teeth bared. Realizing that there is no more time to think, Bell finally uses his newfound skill and uses it to pierce Caliburn through the Leviathan's face. But the boy does not stop there, and many shining swords appear next to the monster. The glittering weapon strikes the scaly body one after another, causing the monster to roar in fury and pain. Bell watches this with satisfaction, remembering his past life, in which he often had to be in similar battles. He spreads his arms out to the sides and takes a deep breath, gathering sparkling power around himself. Now he is ready for the attack of these bloodthirsty monsters, and his body is filled with a bright feeling of excitement and his own superiority. The Leviathans do not keep you waiting long and immediately rush to attack. With a grin on his lips, the boy thinks to himself that now it's time for him to enjoy fishing. He uses formation A, interception, to attack them all at once. The Leviathans, uncomprehending, continue to attack, and the little boy seems like easy prey to them. While the formation of the Starblade causes several floating shining swords to appear, their blades as sharp as Caliburn itself, and easily cutting through their powerful, massive bodies. I'll cut you all into sashimi. Bell grins, getting into a fighting stance. Meanwhile, Laser is also fighting other Leviathans, attacking the monsters with a furious cry. He swings his sword and strikes the monster in the head, slamming its mouth right into the thick layer of ice. The monster tries to escape, but the man quickly runs after him, catching up and mercilessly finishing him off. More than 5 minutes have passed, so Laser is sure that Bell is long dead. Spencer smiles widely, flatteringly giving the man a few compliments. A smug Laser replies that it's no wonder he's so good, since he's on a completely different level than the likes of Spencer himself. He orders them to stand behind until it's all over, unless, of course, Spencer wants to die here today. The boy obediently stands behind, promising to support and protect Laser from this position. Suddenly, Spencer hears the ice cracking right under his feet. The guy is stunned. He doesn't understand why the ice cover he created suddenly began to crack. Suddenly, a huge tentacle breaks through the ice completely and crashes right into Spencer, throwing him up with a powerful blow. Laser turns around sharply and cries out in surprise. A huge, powerful body quickly emerges from the ice. The hole in the ice grows larger every moment until it becomes the size of an entire ship. Laser grabs his weapon, breathing out in shock and trying to calm his racing heart. They have a very unpleasant opponent. The man realizes that right in front of him is a monster called Charybdis. Its tentacles are incredibly long, and at their ends you can easily see suction cups, like those of an octopus. With great difficulty, Laser manages to dodge the attacks of the new monster. Charybdis is a B-rank monster, and requires at least several B-rank paladins to subdue it. Therefore, if Laser is not extremely careful, he will definitely die in this battle. The monster watches every movement of its victim with small, bright red eyes on its huge muzzle. Suddenly, the monster attacks again, and it is extremely difficult for Laser to dodge these attacks. But the man is not going to give up so easily, and uses all the strength he has to resist the monster. He understands perfectly well that if even one tentacle reaches his body, he will be doomed to death. Therefore, Laser tries to hit the tentacles attacking him with his weapon in order to inflict at least some damage on the monster. I need to get this sorted out quickly. A thought flashes through his head. Laser's B-rank ability is fairly simple, allowing him to charge his weapon with mana for one powerful strike. And despite all this simplicity, this ability is very strong, and often helped him out in previous battles, helping him to win. Therefore, the man expects to kill Charybdis with just one such, but very powerful blow. The monster tries to grab him, but Laser deftly dodges to the side, forcing the enemy to become entangled in his own tentacles. With a deafening cry, Laser gathers mana and delivers his blow to Charybdis's massive body. The brightest waves of energy from this attack immediately spread in all directions, accompanied by a loud roar. It takes Laser a long time to realize that all his efforts were in vain. Charybdis proved to be smarter than most of the monsters and used one of the Leviathans as a shield. Now the guy will have to collect mana again to charge the sword for an attack. But the monster clearly has no intention of giving him that opportunity. Laser doesn't have time to dodge and is instantly blown aside by just one blow from a flexible tentacle. Having somehow managed to group himself in flight, he lands on board his ship. However, now he has nowhere to stand, since all the ice Spencer created was destroyed by the monster. To add to the problems already present, several more Leviathans are already rushing straight towards the ship. Laser is surprised because he was sure that he had cleared absolutely the entire space, leaving not a single monster behind. But two Leviathans immediately emerge from under the water and make him realize his mistake. The monsters simultaneously rush at Laser, who has already become quite tired. And along with their attack, the tentacle of Charybdis also approaches the guy. Focused on the two Leviathans, Laser fails to notice another danger and misses the blow. Unable to stay on his feet, the guy falls straight onto the deck, spraying his blood all over the place. His divine weapon is made for duels, so he has no advantage in fighting against many enemies at once. As if understanding this, the Leviathans are already hanging over the practically defenseless man. Gritting his teeth from tension, the guy frantically tries to come up with at least some way out of the situation. But there is a catastrophic lack of time. The monster's face is getting closer and closer. Laser is taken by surprise when Bell appears out of nowhere and attacks the monster. Laser's mouth drops open in surprise. unable to believe what is happening right before his eyes. With one deft movement, the boy, whom he had already thought long dead, cuts off the heads of two huge leviathans at once. Bell turns to the shocked boy, noting with a chuckle that he found himself in an extremely difficult situation. Despite Laser trying to kill him, Bell kindly offers to help him with these monsters. But Laser still hasn't realized what powers this boy has, so he just yells at him angrily in response. He is sure that Bell is not capable of defeating a monster like Charybdis because he is hundreds of times stronger than the Leviathans. So what? Is it a problem? The boy asks with a smile. Meanwhile, Charybdis is already stretching its long, flexible tentacles towards its new victim. Without wasting any time, Bell uses Starblade formation again. Several shining swords easily cut through the tentacles, reaching towards the boy. Laser looks at this with his mouth open. He couldn't even imagine that the boy, who had only recently awakened his weapon, would be able to use this unique ability. Moreover, such an ability must be simply incredibly difficult to manage. Bell continues to attack Charybdis, promising to cut the monster into pieces and feed it to the fish. As if understanding every offensive word, Charybdis lets out a loud, vile scream that cuts painfully into the ear. Despite the severed tentacles, the monster is still strong and attacks again. Bell freezes in midair, clutching the hilt of the sword tightly in her palm, and waits for the monster to get close enough. There is a ship right behind the boy, and Laser realizes with horror that now there will be not a single piece left of it. Bell also understands what the monster is up to and decides to reveal his trump card as well. He flies higher into the air and uses Formation B, preparing to attack. "Integration!" the boy shouts loudly. Laser looks wide-eyed at Bell, whose swords have merged into one. Meanwhile, the boy himself is already pointing the sword towards Charybdis, and a powerful stream of brightly glowing energy rushes towards the monster. Such a strong blow with a sword cuts off the pitiful remains of tentacles from the huge body of the monster. But this is only the beginning, and Bell, gritting her teeth with tension, is already preparing to strike the next blow. This time he gets right up close to the monster, plunging the still glowing caliburn into its flesh with all his might. The boy holds tightly to the hilt of the sword with both hands, driving the weapon into Charybdis's body up to the very base. "Take a nap on the ocean floor, you damn monster!" he screams at the top of his lungs. With a sharp movement, he soars upward, thereby brutally cutting the monster's body in half. The boy immediately returns to the body of the defeated enemy to make sure of his victory. Laser, who has been watching the battle from the sidelines this entire time, realizes to his horror that this child has just managed to single-handedly defeat one of the strongest sea monsters. Meanwhile, Bell is already standing on the deck, ready to deal with Laser too. "Let me solve your problem quickly," the boy says to Jin's servant. Laser thinks to himself that this child will become a threat to Jin much sooner than they thought. So the guy decides to kill him at any cost. Taking a step towards the boy, Laser mockingly reminds him that he is the strongest B-rank paladin and that dealing with him is not that easy. "Did Charybdis really hit you on the head?" Bell answers with a chuckle. He is quite confident in himself, since Laser had to bring Spencer along for a sneak attack to win. The mention of this fact only enrages Laser even more, and he clenches his teeth, glaring at the enemy in front of him. Having made up his mind, the man attacks anyway. Bell has no intention of giving in to him, and with a war cry he also rushes into the attack. Their divine weapons collided with a deafening clang, and bright sparks flew around. A quick lunge, a backhand strike, a parry. The movements merged into a single dance. Laser, exhaling forcefully, brought his sword down from above, putting all his weight into the blow and hoping to break the enemy's will and destroy his defense with one blow. However, Bell managed to repel this attack as well, remaining firmly on his feet. The boy once again assumed a fighting stance, gripping Caliburn's hilt with both hands and pointing the blade towards his opponent. Enraged by the failure, Laser rushed into the attack again with a loud cry. Bell used the Formation Interception A skill to defend himself for the umpteenth time that day. The boy pointed the brightly shining sword straight at his opponent, hoping to inflict significant damage on him. A tense Laser watches the boy's every move, trying to anticipate his attacks and repel any attacks. Their weapons clash again, sparks flying in all directions, burning skin and leaving the smell of iron in the air. Laser is confident that the boy is almost caught, and an attack from a blind spot will help him win for good. The man grips the handle of his weapon tighter, filling it with mana for the final blow. With a loud cry, he attacks the enemy with his shining strike. This blow destroys Bell's shining swords, which were about to fall on Laser's back. The guy chuckles and asks if Bell really thought he could win with such a simple trick. The boy understands that it will be very difficult to win. In addition, the problem is further complicated by the fact that using a unique skill consumes a huge amount of mana. Belle's meager remaining mana is only enough for one star formation sword, and Laser understands this too, so with a malicious grin he is already moving towards the boy, promising to end his life right now. Like a man possessed, he rushed forward, closing the distance to strike his opponent down. Belle managed to dodge the slashing attack at the last second, but Laser, not giving the boy time to catch his breath, attacked again, and this time his attack still reached its target. A sharp pain pierced Belle's entire body, knocking the air out of his lungs. Pulling himself together, the boy immediately jumped to the side, not allowing his opponent to finish him off. He could use the Aegis to gain victory, but then there was too much risk of getting lost in the darkness. So Belle decides to use the Ragnarok pistol. The boy stretches out both hands with guns in front of him and pulls two triggers at the same time. Laser dodges both bullets without any difficulty, laughing loudly at Belle's attempt. But the boy is already rushing forward with his sword at the ready, and Laser realizes that this was just a diversionary maneuver. And yet, he is still sure that this child is too slow and will not be able to reach his body. Meanwhile, the boy, not wasting his energy on empty chatter, again replaces the sword with a pistol. Now he has a divine weapon in both his hands, and he is going to use them both. Laser realizes that the enemy was using the recoil from the shot to increase his speed. But he thinks that even so, all the boy has achieved is just a small cut on his cheek. Gotcha. At this moment, Belle thinks, smiling and anticipating victory. And then a shining sword, seemingly out of nowhere, pierces Laser's body through and through, causing a painful cry to escape his chest. Now the guy understands what Belle was trying to achieve all this time. He, with incredible effort, even pierced through by a sword, tries to rise from the deck, leaning on one knee. His face is distorted by a grimace of pain and disappointment. The boy calmly approaches the defeated enemy. He points Caliburn's blade at Laser, saying that the games are over now. The boy suggests that he simply surrender, and then he promises to kill quickly and without suffering. Surrender? Laser asks again, not believing what he heard. Laughing bitterly, he nevertheless rises to his feet. One day you will become a threat to Lord Jin, so you must die here and now, he screams in rage. Belle doesn't understand why this man is so devoted to his brother. Hearing this question, Laser is momentarily lost in memories. Once upon a time, Jin Catastrophe saved him and gave him the opportunity to live on with some purpose. After that massacre, Laser could barely stand on his feet, ready to fall forever. Dropping his knees to the cold ground, Laser was then certain that his end had come. He could not find the strength to get up and continue on his way. As he lay powerless on the ground, trying to catch his elusive consciousness, he heard soft approaching footsteps. Jin Catastrophe stopped next to the lying guy, looking at him thoughtfully. The mercenary in front of him had just killed about 300 people, but the paladin was not at all frightened by this, but rather, on the contrary, was delighted. Hearing someone else's melodic voice, Laser raised his head up with the last of his strength. Jin took a healing elixir from the pocket of his cloak and slowly uncorked the bottle. The guy tilted the bottle so that the potion began to flow directly onto the body of the exhausted mercenary. This healed Laser and returned his lost strength. "Rejoice, for now I will be your master," Jin said to him then, before the catastrophe. The memories were cut off and Laser's mind returned to reality. "Mr. Jin saved me," he said to Belle, who was waiting for an answer. Now Laser is obliged to repay his savior in kind. The memories gave him strength, and the guy is now standing more firmly on his feet. Ready to pay any price for his master's life, Laser again rushes into the attack, in a naive attempt to still win. Belle uses his unique skill again, and the swords, obedient to his power, float nearby in the air. The boy understands that this man has already made his decision and will not back down under any circumstances. He thought Laser was a sick bastard, but now he thinks there's something chivalrous about the guy after all. "Let's fight with all our might," he suggests to Laser. The guy just swears loudly at him in response. With the last of his strength, Laser begins to fill his divine weapon with mana again to deliver another shining blow. Belle notices this in time, and immediately understands that he cannot allow the enemy to have time to gather energy for such a powerful technique. However, this technique requires some time to prepare, so Belle decides to get ahead of Laser. Without further hesitation, he raises his sword and attacks again. Suddenly, Laser lunges forward, dodging Caliburn. At the same time, the guy suddenly kicks Belle, who didn't have time to dodge the attack. The boy realizes that it was a trap that he fell into. "Checkmate!" Laser shouts, raising his hand for the final attack. Belle steps back, thinking frantically, "This is my last chance." The thought flashes through his head. Making an instant decision, Belle attacks back. Another shimmering sword appears behind Laser and plunges straight into his flesh. The guy wheezes in pain, bright red blood spraying from his mouth. He doesn't understand how this happened, because he was sure that he had destroyed all of this boy's swords. After catching her breath, Belle replies that not all of the swords were actually destroyed. In reality, he just let Laser think that way. He simply predicted his opponent's future actions. Before he dies, Laser has the feeling that this hellish child has survived more battles than he has. With his shoulders slumped and his legs buckling, the boy stands next to the body of the defeated enemy. This time he was unacceptably close to failure, and if not for the ace up his sleeve, he would have definitely lost. However, he still managed to defeat the strongest B-rank paladin. So, he is getting stronger and stronger as planned. With these thoughts, Belle heads back to the castle, where Sarah is waiting for him. The girl is looking forward to him returning from his mission. She hurriedly goes through every room in the castle, hoping that he has already returned. Not finding him in the castle, Sarah even goes out into the garden, loudly shouting her brother's name and looking for him with her eyes. Having reached the very gates, the girl still returns back. She walks down the hallway, the soft carpet muffling the sound of her heels. The girl understands that most likely Belle has not returned yet. And this scares her a little because so much time has passed and the task has probably already been completed. Then she notices that the door to the library is slightly open. Deciding that Belle is there, the girl smiles happily and runs there. Running up to the door, she pushes the heavy doors with all her might and goes inside. A silhouette moves towards the girl, and despite the fact that only the outlines of the figure are visible in the darkness, she decides that it is Belle. However, very soon she realizes that she was wrong. Yin Catastrophe looks down on her, and his gaze does not promise anything good for the girl. Frightened, the girl looks away, clutching her own sleeve tightly. She is very scared, but she must greet her older brother according to all the rules. But as soon as she starts talking, the guy's gaze becomes even more frightening. His eyes glow red, and his lips are pursed in disdain. Sarah's heart starts to beat wildly from fear, and she involuntarily takes a step back. "Useless," Jin says contemptuously, leaning towards the girl. A frightened Sarah retreats even further, not knowing what to say or how to defend herself. Suddenly, Belle appears behind her and steps forward, covering her sister with her body. Sarah looks up, still not comprehending what exactly happened. "What do you want from Sarah, big brother?" the boy asks, looking up at Jin fearlessly. The guy remains silent, only snorting contemptuously in response to the question. "Brother!" Sarah cries out, finally coming to her senses. With a joyful cry, she throws herself into her brother's arms, wrapping her arms around him with all her might. Here the girl notices a torn sleeve and a wound on his arm. Belle tells her not to worry because it's just a small scratch. He says he just fought a strong man named Laser. Jin's face immediately becomes a little more tense. Belle continues that he took it upon himself to deal with this guy. So what? Jin grins, turning his back to the younger ones and already intending to leave. He is sure that these two are nothing, like a nut lying on the road. He has exactly the same opinion about his other younger sister, who is useless and stupid. Therefore, he demands that they not waste any more of his time and get out of the way. However, Belle calls out to him again. He fearlessly tells his older brother that he will become their father's successor, since Jin is unable to protect the family. Hearing this, the guy stops abruptly. His eyes begin to sparkle brighter than usual and his jaw clenches tensely. He turns around abruptly, glaring at the younger ones, and darkness begins to slowly spread around his figure. He directs his power towards children, frightening and suppressing them. Sarah rushes towards her brother in fear, hiding her face in his chest. The boy is not going to please his older brother with his fear and continues to confidently look him in the eyes. Jin smirks when he sees this. The grin quickly turns into a loud, slightly crazy laugh. He jokes that sometimes even pebbles are interesting to look at. The guy tells Belle that he can try to kill him whenever he wants and calmly heads towards the library exit. The boy looks after him, not intending to turn his back on his brother, and Sarah freezes in fear next to him. As Jin leaves, Belle places her hand on her sister's shoulder, comforting and soothing. He thinks to himself that the elder brother with this overwhelming power is really strong and extraordinary. Looking at it from a rank perspective, Belle is currently at the top of the B rank, and Jin is already an A rank paladin. The difference between these ranks is incredibly huge, and in order to defeat him, Belle needs to reach A rank before he graduates from Athens. A few days later, Belle emerges from the castle with a suitcase in her hands and carefully places it on the ground. Duke Galleon. Catastrophe and several servants went out into the castle courtyard to escort the young master to the academy. The father notes that the boy looks ready to learn. Belle drops to one knee and bows her head, thanking her father for the opportunity to attend the academy. Athena requires her students to be accompanied by a bodyguard, so the Duke wants to send a B-rank paladin along with Belle. The man Galleon has chosen bows his head and asks Belle to come to him for help at any time. Belle thanks him for his support, but still asks the Duke if he can make a request of him. Galleon asks, a little surprised, "What kind of request exactly?" The boy looks back at the gates just opening. With a happy smile, Sarah comes out into the yard, barely holding the suitcase with her things with both hands. "Sorry, I'm late," she smiles shyly. Belle comes closer to her and takes the heavy suitcase from the girl. Turning to the Duke, the boy asks if he can take Sarah with him to the academy. Surprised, Galleon first wants to understand what this request is about. Belle explains that he is worried about leaving his beloved little sister alone and unprotected. The Duke refuses the boy this request, since according to the rules, only a bodyguard is allowed to take with you to the academy. Sarah excitedly presses her hands to her chest, looking at her father with hope. Galleon sternly tells her that there is no point in begging her. He will not change his mind anyway. Belle intervenes, this time asking to appoint Sarah as his bodyguard. After all, when his sister is next to him, he feels 100 times stronger, as if he is even capable of defeating an A-rank paladin. The Duke frowned in displeasure, thinking over what he had heard. In his opinion, this is a very serious statement. In the end, he tells Belle to do as he sees fit. At this point, the conversation ends, and the children climb into the carriage to set off on their journey. Throughout the entire trip, Sarah, who was outside the castle for the first time, did not move away from the window, looking at the scenery. Very soon, they reach the academy itself. Belle helps her sister out of the carriage, catching her on the high step. The girl looks with admiration at the place where her beloved brother will now study. The academy building looks great because nobles study there. On the way, Belle asks the girl to promise that while he is in the classroom, she will sit quietly and study in their common room. Having received a promise from her, the boy heads to the hostel, but Sarah's gaze is drawn to something happening nearby. This is a platform where duels between high-ranking students take place. This is a good opportunity to look at them and learn something new. Sarah presses her hands to her chest in excitement, confident that all of these students are incredibly strong. Belle thinks to himself that most of them look like they are only D rank, except for one guy who is clearly a head taller than everyone else. Belle watches the unknown student closely, noting every detail. This guy is most likely a C rank and won't be able to handle Belle himself. Meanwhile, a new enemy approaches this stranger. With a smug grin, the boy grips his weapon tighter. With a battle cry, he rushes at the new enemy. The guy in front of him just smirks in response, the expression in his eyes hidden by his wide-brimmed hat. Meanwhile, the fair-haired student had already approached as close as possible, and his weapon was aimed straight at the face of the stranger in the hat. "Watch out!" Sarah can't take it anymore and screams. But even without her warning, the student in the hat easily avoids someone else's attack. Dodging, he clenches his fist, and the force of it knocks his opponent off his feet, hitting his head painfully on the asphalt. Belle has a feeling that this guy didn't even use his divine weapon, which means he's at least a B-rank paladin, maybe even stronger. Hearing snippets of conversations between other students, he realizes that the heir to the House of Rothwindsor has just defeated a student named Zeroro. Hearing the name of the house, he cries out in surprise, unable to contain his emotions. House Rothwindsor is the most hated rival of the Catastrophe family. Belle draws her eyebrows together tensely, looking even more closely at the winner of the fight. This guy with red hair and a wide hat is his and Sarah's worst enemy. It's almost time for the opening ceremony. The student council president delivers his opening remarks. The guy says that he is happy with all his heart to welcome all the first years here today. He gives an unkind smile before continuing. The guy hopes that all the guys who entered the academy are strong and worth something. Belle recalls that the speaker's name is Albert Rothwindsor, and he is a high-ranking third-year student, as well as the heir to a family that has produced many impressive paladins throughout its history. The boy had never met him in his past life, but he had heard that this guy had reached S rank at only 18 years old. Belle tries to remember some details that he was able to catch in the image of the man who killed him and Sarah. Could this have been Albert Rothwindsor? After the opening speech, the first-year students unanimously discussed the student council president who spoke. There are no more paladins in the student council who have already reached B rank like him. According to the rules, the student council is formed from the 4 winners of the martial arts festival, and the winner becomes the president of the student council, so Albert is currently the strongest paladin in the entire academy. Belle doesn't know if this guy was the killer, but to prevent this attack in the future, he must show Albert, the future head of House Rothwindsor, how strong the Catastrophe family can be. Instead of holding elections, Athena holds a martial arts festival once a year to select student council members. This means that Belle simply has to join the festival that will be held this year and force Albert to admit defeat. After the ceremony, all students are seated at their desks in the classroom. A boy with bright green hair walks into the classroom and looks around to choose a seat to sit on. Noticing Belle, the boy resolutely walks towards him and asks, a little embarrassed, if he can sit down next to him. Torn from his own thoughts, Belle is at a loss for a second, but immediately corrects himself and allows the boy to sit down. The boy says his name is Limeflexel, and he hopes they will have a wonderful 3 years of schooling. Belle agrees, and only a second later he cries out in amazement, asking the name again. Lime raises his eyebrows questioningly, not understanding what is so surprising about his name. Belle apologizes with a chuckle, remembering to himself that he knew this guy in his past life. In a few years, Limeflexel will destroy the rebellious nobles out of his own hatred and will be known as nothing less than the Knight of Vengeance. However, now this boy is only a shadow of his future self. Lime asks Belle's name, and the boy remembers his father's instructions. The Duke ordered him to hide his real name from everyone in this academy. Many people will want to help him just by hearing his family name, and then studying at the academy will lose all meaning. Belle must prove to his father that he is capable of doing everything on his own without outside help. Therefore, the boy introduces himself as Liebel Slayer because he needs to hide his true identity at least until he defeats Albert. Hearing the last name and looking at the badge, Lime immediately understands that in front of him is a child from the common people. The icon on their uniform indicates their status. Commoners wear a round badge, while nobles wear a star. Belle nods in agreement, confirming that he is a commoner. Lime reveals that he is actually a commoner baronet. Although there are so many nobles in the academy that it doesn't really matter. There aren't many commoners here, mostly everyone comes from prestigious families. So Lime hopes that they can become friends given their similar status. Belle thinks that the future Knight of Vengeance will become a good friend and reliable ally to him. In his past life, he had no one he could call his friend. Suddenly their conversation is interrupted. A boy with bright red hair and eyes of the same color approaches them. With a mocking laugh, he says that he did not expect to see his city friend here at all. There are whispers everywhere that this boy's name is Roger Lindgris, and that he is the son of an earl. So, why are you here, Lime? Roger asks. Lime curls up into a ball, barely audibly answering that he passed the entrance exams and was accepted for training. Roger congratulates him on his admission with a loud laugh. He leans down and places his hand on the boy's shoulder, cruelly telling him that there is no place in Athena for commoners like him. So Lime needs to pack his things immediately and get out of here. The boy looks ahead at a loss, stuttering in fear and not knowing what to say in response. Slaves must obey their master, Roger shouts loudly, turning the embrace into a stranglehold. He believes that he can crush a person with the status of a commoner with just one word. Enough? Belle stands up for the boy. Lime tries to say something, but only wheezing comes out of his throat due to the hand strangling his throat. Roger looks at Belle and asks who he is, and immediately notices the round badge on his uniform. The guy realizes that there is another commoner in front of him. Belle gets up from his seat and demands that Lime be released now. Surprisingly, Roger actually removes his hand from the boy's neck, and she makes the same sharp lunge forward. He kicks Lime's chair, and the boy flies to the side with a loud crash and hits the floor painfully. Belle immediately runs up to Lime to catch him. Roger laughs loudly, admiring the result of his kick. "And you call yourself a paladin?" Belle screams in rage. The boy believes that it is precisely because Roger has the status of a nobleman that he should take care of ordinary people. Roger, on the other hand, takes the opposite view, believing that all slaves are good for is to be used by their masters. This guy is clearly very short-sighted. He can't understand that a count can fall just as easily as the most ordinary commoner. Roger realizes that none of these commoners are going to follow his order and leave the academy, so he unsheathes his divine weapon. Belle decides that there is nothing to be done and also prepares for battle. He asks Lime to step back, and he takes a wide step forward and extends his hand. Roger looks at him in confusion. Belle says he intends to knock some sense into him today. What a brave slave. Roger laughs at the top of his lungs. He is sure that the boy, who has only a scabbard instead of a divine weapon, is nothing special and is not even capable of swatting a fly. Belle replies with a grin that, in that case, Roger would be worse than a fly. This infuriates the guy. No one has ever dared to look down on him like that. He promises Belle to kill him, and the boy tells him, "Try it if you can." All the other students dropped everything they were doing and watched attentively what was happening. With an anticipatory smile on his face, Roger rushes at his opponent. Bell calmly waits for the boy to run up to him and try to hit him. Roger, showing off in front of the other students, proudly waves his weapon, but he never manages to land the blow he so desired. A girl suddenly appears right between the opponents. With a peaceful smile, she releases her power, and Roger stops abruptly, not reaching his target. The harp in the girl's hands begins to make such a painful sound that the guy screams in pain, covering his ears with his hands. Belle also covers her ears, unable to withstand such a powerful sound attack. Having achieved the desired effect, the girl jumps onto the desk and crosses her legs, making herself more comfortable. She winks at the instigators of the fight, reminding them that they are all in the same class and should get along with each other. Belle holds her still sore ear and tries to figure out who this girl is with such powerful strength. He had never seen anything like it before. With a kind smile, the girl says that her name is Sylpha, and she is glad to meet everyone here. Roger regretfully realizes that this girl is from the family of the Marquis of Elpage, and therefore higher in status than him. The teacher enters the classroom and asks everyone to take their seats. Today is the first lesson, and he intends to evaluate the abilities of each of the students. The man asks the students to use the sacred treasure to attack the monsters. In today's lesson, they will start with the golem. With its help, you can easily measure the strength of each student. At the teacher's command, the first student steps forward. As he exhales, he strikes, aiming at the golem. But unfortunately for the boy, his attack does almost no harm to this monster. This golem is very hard and will not be easily damaged. After this student's strike, only a small mark from the weapon remains on the golem's face. And then, literally a second later, even he takes a drag, as if nothing had happened. Belle begins to think that things are not as simple as they seem. The teacher asks the next student to come out and try his hand. One by one, the freshmen come out and try to cause some damage. But none of them manage to achieve even slightly impressive results. The thoughtful teacher realizes that this year, most of the students are only E-ranked. Lime steps forward, holding his weapon a little awkwardly. The teacher notes that this weapon does not have even a drop of magic, which means that this boy has the lowest rank. At the teacher's command, Lime rushes forward, holding the weapon's handle tightly with both hands. Having reached the golem, the boy lunges forward and strikes with all his might. And then he falls on his back from the force of the recoil, and there is not a scratch left on the figure itself. Roger bursts into loud laughter, and several students behind him also chuckle mockingly. Lime raises himself up on his elbows and looks at the golem, hoping to see at least some damage, but finds nothing. Roger is determined to show everyone what the difference is between himself and these stupid commoners. With a smug smile, he summons his weapon and releases his power. His weapon is enveloped in a fiery glow, showing everyone the power of its owner. Roger throws a punch and hits the target. His weapon cuts through the golem's shoulder almost completely. If the blow had been even a little stronger, the monster's arm would have simply fallen off the body. Pleased with himself, Roger calls the weapon back. Not bad, that's D rank. The teacher praises the boy. Roger smiles smugly, pleased with his result. His triumph is interrupted by Sylph, who raises her hand and reminds him that it is now her turn. The girl takes out her harp again and warns everyone about the beginning of her attack. But even despite the warning, none of the students were ready to experience that painful feeling from the sound of her harp again. Children cover their ears with their hands as hard as they can to stop hearing this painful sound. Meanwhile, the girl's wave of power already reaches the next golem, and this time the result is more than impressive. The girl, pleased with herself, returns back to the group of students and Roger comes out to meet her. He says it was not bad, as expected from the Marquis's daughter. With a friendly smile, he extends his hand to the girl. However, she immediately puts an end to his awkward attempt to make friends, demanding that he stop doing this immediately. The girl always thought that in this academy everyone was equal, regardless of their status. She believes that background, status, and money mean nothing. Roger's face immediately darkens, because he had hoped to make some useful acquaintance with this girl. The teacher announces that betrayal will be the next to test his strength. Roger is already looking forward to another entertaining spectacle. So what are you going to do with your sheath? The boy laughs. Bell replies that he doesn't use a scabbard. Before the eyes of the astonished students, the boy takes his divine weapon out of its sheath. Roger's mouth drops open in surprise when he sees that this commoner has two treasures. Even Sylph looks at the boy with surprise and some admiration. Lime freezes in place with delight, watching his friend with wide-open eyes. Roger still hopes to disgrace another commoner by publicly declaring that there is most likely no magical power in this sword. He notes with a chuckle that such a sword cannot even leave a scratch. Who knows? Bell answers him with a half-smile, not wanting to waste time arguing. The boy calmly approaches his golem and raises his hand to strike. Just a second. and the monster is shattered into many pieces, flying in all directions by the blow of his sword. With the same peaceful expression on her face, Belle slowly lowers her divine weapon. The other first years open their mouths wide in surprise and immediately start whispering. The teacher thinks that it is amazing that a sword that is not endowed with magical power so easily completely destroyed the golem. Apparently, fencing is enough for this guy, and he doesn't need magical power at all. Only Roger does not share the general admiration. He cannot comprehend that a commoner is capable of such a magnificent result. Lime runs up to Belle and loudly admires his strength, never tiring of saying how amazing and very surprising it was. The boy smiles back at him and says that Lime will be able to do the same someday if he tries hard and works on himself. Lime is pleased to hear this, but he is still sure that with his level of magical power, he will never be able to pull off something like this. Belle assures him that this is not the case at all, and in fact, Lime definitely has talent, and he sincerely believes that his weapon is first class. Therefore, if Lime does not give up, he will definitely be able to become one of the strongest holy knights. Stuttering with excitement, the boy blushes deeply and thanks for the praise and faith in him. The awkward situation is interrupted by Sylph, who brazenly wedges herself between the boys. She moves almost to Belle's face, passionately asking what this amazing weapon was that surprised her so. The girl had never seen such an amazing sword. The students immediately begin to discuss that this is the most powerful weapon among all the newcomers. Roger, hearing this, is instantly speechless with indignation. Noticing him, the students immediately begin to apologize, convincing the boy that Belle's sword is the most powerful weapon only after Roger's own treasure. Roger grits his teeth and frowns, knowing full well that this is just flattery. The teacher praises the children for the work they have done and announces that today's lesson is over. Tomorrow, according to the plan, there will be a practical test of abilities, for which they will head into the forest, where they will hunt previously released monsters. Therefore, each of them must prepare well. After the lesson, first-year students disperse into small groups and vigorously discuss the past lesson, sharing emotions and impressions. Roger stands to the side and, while no one is watching, says the command, "Come here, Bark." A man wearing dark-rimmed glasses appears nearby, and his gaze seems a little crazy, and his smile evokes at least a feeling of apprehension. Roger reminds that he is here to protect his master, so good success is expected of him tomorrow. "Are you planning to use me in the lesson?" the man asks with a chuckle. Roger asks if this will be a problem, and Bark tells his master that he expected nothing less from him. The boy wants with all his heart for all the commoners and lower aristocrats to fear him, so tomorrow he intends to send this commoner named Libel Slayer to hell. The next day, as planned, the teacher begins testing the practical skills of the newly arrived first-year students. The teacher reminds that monsters were released into the forest today. This means that at the moment there are many monsters of F and E ranks walking around the forest. Therefore, today's task for each student will be to defeat as many of these same monsters as possible. Roger tilts his head, hiding a sinister smile on his lips. The one who kills the most monsters will get extra points, so the teacher encourages each of them to try their best. The man gives the command to begin, and the students gradually disperse in different directions. Sylpha shouts to Belle that the competition has begun, and at the end they will find out who will be the first. She doesn't yet know that the boy doesn't intend to give up first place this time. For the sake of the future, he must show his strength to those around him. Lime catches up with him and asks for permission to go with him, as he still lacks the confidence to fight alone. "Do you think you can't handle it alone?" Belle asks the boy. And then he immediately breaks into a run, shouting at the boy not to fall behind. There are indeed a huge number of monsters in this forest, and each of them looks quite frightening. The monster that appears before the boys has 3 heads, but Belle knocks one of them off with just one blow. Without stopping for a second, the boy continues to attack the monster. It takes very little time before the monster is finally defeated. Belle pulls out another fang as proof that this is already the 15th monster he has defeated. Lime watches him in awe, never ceasing to be amazed at how his new friend is able to destroy an E-rank monster with just one blow. "Do you have time to chat?" Belle asks him in return. Suddenly, another monster appears behind Lime, frightening him with its loud growl. Belle lunges forward, pushing the boy aside, and immediately attacks the monster, striking straight into its wickedly grinning face. There are many more enemies than he initially thought, so he orders his friend to remain vigilant. Embarrassed, Lime only nods fearfully in response. Meanwhile, the rest of the students are fighting quite successfully against many monsters. There are all sorts of low-ranking monsters in this forest today. Lime thinks he needs to try harder. Roger watches the boys from the bushes nearby. He is terribly infuriated by the successes of this commoner, and he cannot wait for the opportunity to put his plan into action. Just the thought that he will soon take revenge warms his soul. This will be the real end for this vile commoner and his equally useless friend. Extending his summoning staff forward, he activates its ability. Bell realizes something strange is starting to happen when a pentagram appears on the grass right in front of him. He looks down tensely. A monster begins to emerge directly from this pentagram. It is a huge fire salamander that emerges from the pentagram, completely engulfed in fire and growling viciously. Bell involuntarily takes a step back, staring at the new monster. The monster lifts its bared mouth upward, showing the sharpness of its teeth. The remaining students, who immediately notice the monster, scattered in fear to the sides. Only Bell and his new friend remain standing next to the salamander. "It can't be," Lime whispers in amazement. Never before had the boys seen such huge and frightening monsters. Finally, after the initial shock had passed, Lime screamed in fear. The salamander releases a powerful stream of fire straight at him, and if it weren't for Bell, who managed to push the boy aside, there would have been no wet spot left of him. Bell himself remains standing in place, holding his shield forward. In response to Lime's frightened cry, he orders him to run away with the others. Bell can't figure out why there's a B-rank monster in a place like this. Deciding that this is a great opportunity to have some fun, he uses the vanguard of holy swords. Stretching his hand forward, he directs several glowing swords at once straight at the monster. There are many bloody wounds on the monster's body, and the salamander screams loudly in pain. Roger, still watching from the bushes, is very surprised to realize that this commoner can use a shield, and even uses unique skills. So the boy calls Bark to him again. With an obsequious smile, the man awaits new orders. Meanwhile, Bell continues to fight the fire monster. Lime watches this with equal surprise, wondering who his new friend really is. It was extremely surprising to the boy that a first-year student, and a commoner at that, could fight a B-rank monster so successfully. At this moment, Bell sends a multitude of glowing swords at the monster, intending to finally kill it. But, to his surprise, he is not allowed to do this. Each of his attacking swords is hit by a bullet fired by someone and destroyed. Dissatisfied with this development of events, the boy looks around, searching for a new enemy. A man walks confidently out of the forest towards the boys. He advances softly and silently, and his entire appearance screams of considerable strength. Once out in the open, the man recognizes Bell's skills as unique and amazing. The boy immediately asks if the man is the owner of this monster and what his purpose is. With a half-mad grin on his lips, the man replies that his target is him. Immediately, the salamander, on the command of its master, produces a new portion of fire. The stranger takes aim and fires ice bullets directly into this stream. Two completely opposite forces collide with each other. Bell immediately realizes that this man wants to blind him with water vapor. So he immediately uses his shield skill, creating powerful gusts of wind around his body and driving away the steam. "Slow!" Bark grins, taking aim again. He uses Water Disaster Prison, which causes many strange air bubbles to appear around him. Each of them holds Bell's sword within them, thus preventing the boy from using them. Bark adjusts his glasses on the bridge of his nose, quite pleased with himself. Bell understands that this man has a rank of at least B. All his swords are sealed, and the salamander is still standing nearby, already preparing to attack again. The monster, obeying its master, once again creates a powerful stream of fire. And again, Bark takes out his weapon, takes aim, and pulls the trigger. Bell grips his shield tighter, using it to protect himself from the attack. He is not sure that he can win this fight. His opponents now are a Holy Knight and a B-rank monster at the same time, and dodging two attacks at once is quite difficult. Lime watches his friend in panic, trying to figure out how to help him. Looking around, he notices Roger, who is standing nearby, no longer hiding at all. Lime's mouth drops open in surprise as he realizes what's happening. In Roger's hands is the Lingrease family's secret treasure, which apparently has the ability to summon. With a scream, Lime rushes towards his classmate. Roger turns around in surprise, realizing too late that he has been discovered. "Is this your familiar?" Lime asks the boy. And then he immediately demands that this massacre be stopped, because his friend is in great danger and may even die. Instead of answering, Roger hits the boy in the stomach with the other side of his staff. "Get some sleep for now," he says to Lime, who is lying on the grass. The boy tries to get up, mentally scolding himself for not being able to help his friend at such a moment. He remembers his father, who mercilessly tortured him in an attempt to achieve the manifestation of magical powers. "My son can't even release his magic power, how pathetic," his father told him then. The next memory is of Roger mocking him by dunking his face in a bowl on the floor. Anger at his tormentors gives the boy strength, and his hand already reaches for his weapon. With difficulty, he gradually rises, surprising Roger, who was about to leave. Lime remembers Belle's words about how he has talent, and he just needs to keep fighting and not let himself give up. It was the first time anyone had said such words to him. So Lime will do everything in his power to prevent his friend from dying today. Roger asks with interest what he is going to do. "You're trash." He humiliates the boy again. Lime suddenly tells him firmly to shut up. This time he will determine his own worth. Roger looks at Lime in amazement as his silhouette is suddenly enveloped in magical power. He is immediately overcome with black envy, and he shouts at the boy not to become arrogant just because he learned to use magic. But this time, all his threats prove to be meaningless. Not waiting for the expected fear, Roger tightens his grip on the weapon in his hands and releases the power. Since this commoner does not want it the easy way, it means that he is destined to die today. Lime responds by raising his divine weapon, fully prepared to attack. Roger's fiery power clashes with Lime's magic in midair. However, this time his fire cannot cause any harm to Lime. "What?" Roger cries out in shock. Never before had he seen this boy so calm and confident in himself and his abilities. And this makes Roger even more angry, and, losing his head from the anger that has seized him, he again thoughtlessly rushes into the attack. He is sure that this is all just some kind of misunderstanding, and now he will finish off this commoner with one blow. But this does not happen. Once again, their divine weapons clash and the fight begins. Roger screams in fear as he finally realizes that he will not win this battle. Lime grips the handle of his weapon tighter, increasing the flow of his own attack magic. In one motion, he shatters Roger's weapon into dozens of tiny pieces. Shocked, the boy falls to his knees, completely unarmed. He looks in disbelief at the commoner who today turns out to be stronger and more talented than he is. Roger's mind was racing with thoughts that there was no way an F-rank commoner could defeat a D-rank holy knight like him. Lime says thoughtfully that it's so strange for him now to realize that Roger used to scare him like crazy. Now he feels absolutely nothing. Lime holds out his hand and demands that the summoning staff be given to him. Roger still doesn't want to give up so easily, reminding Lime that he is, after all, from a Count's family and can destroy his house with just one word. Instead of a pointless argument, Lime again draws his weapon forward. With unprecedented calm, he suddenly thrusts the weapon into the ground right in front of Roger, startling him. "Give it back," he says, leaning toward his defeated opponent. Roger's body is already beginning to be covered in a crust of ice, and the frightened boy immediately promises to give Lime the staff. With tears in his eyes, he begs for forgiveness. Bowing his head, Roger holds out his staff and promises that he will never do anything terrible again. Lime takes the staff from his outstretched hand. He will spare Roger on the condition that he never approaches him or his friend again. The boy agrees and Lime nods, accepting his promise. A malicious grin appears on Roger's lips as he bows his head. He presses his hands into the ground, and a chain from another weapon appears under his fingers. Roger releases the force and the weapon flies into the air right behind the enemy. Lime looks at him in disappointment, feeling movement behind him. "I lied, you idiot!" "Die!" Roger screams, raising his bowed head sharply. Lime turns his head slightly and looks back. With a slight movement, he erects a small ice wall behind himself, into which the fire weapon crashes, failing to reach its target. Roger's mouth drops open in shock, beads of sweat starting to run down his face from the strain.